think it's a good time to start. Okay, hi everybody, good morning. My name is Paco Pangalangan. I'm the Executive Director of Strat-based ADRi Institute. And welcome everybody to today's virtual roundtable discussion on environmental stewardship post-pandemic, the path to a green economic recovery. Before we get started, or rather to start us off officially, I think I'll first introduce the president of Strat-based ADRi Institute, Professor Dean Manhit, for some welcoming remarks. Professor Manhit.
Thank you, Paco. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to our partners, not only in government, civil society, the academia, and the private sector. I'd like to give special thanks for their participation. Congressman P.D. Barsaga, the chairman of the Committee on Environment, the House of Representatives, our friends and partners in the DENR, Undersecretary Kuna and Undersecretary Te. So good morning again. Allow me to share a few slides of an advocacy in the Institute that we have done for the past 7 years. Every time we start a year, I like to remind our team, our research team, that we live in an era characterized by radical, complex, and accelerated change. A time where explosive, dynamic, and quickening change creates a strategic surprise, an unanticipated, abrupt change that blinds us all, blindsides. Try to remember where we are at the start of the year, January, looking forward to a bright, maybe more productive economically, 2020. And here we are now with this pandemic that originated from Wuhan, that is not only impacting us economically, politically, societal, but even environmental. Here in Strat-based, we try to track what we call risks. But after the lockdown in March 17, we suddenly had to reassess and look at the risks affecting us moving forward in a post-quarantine, post-lockdown scenario in the Philippines. But what is surprising for us is that the issue of the environment, or what we call, or internally, I joke about it, I call it global weirding, when you see temperatures going high, especially during the summer months, rains affecting our coastlines, storms. It brings us to this very important issue, that there's a need for climate action. There's a need for environmental stewardship. There's a need to view this pandemic and view it from a lens of a green economic recovery program. We all look forward to creating jobs, jumpstarting the economy. But here in Strat-based ADRi Institute, we have argued, we have published commentaries, we have hosted other webinars. We try to bring this idea of whole of society approach. Not whole of government, not whole of country, but whole of society, where individuals, businesses, civil society groups will focus on environmental stewardship. We must push for a more circular economy, the need to efficiently manage our solid waste, as well as our mineral and forest resources. We need to revisit policies on underutilized industries to make it more productive, but of course, being guided by responsible environmental stewardship. We need to remember the centrality of environmental stewardship in this new normal that we are trying to create. That this path to a green economic recovery should be grounded on sustainable, balanced, responsible, and holistic practices. Since 2017, when we launched what we call the program that we call Philippine Business for Environmental Stewards, we have advocated for stewardship of the environment. And now we add this new program that we would like to advocate in our institute, a green economic recovery. One that can create jobs in emerging green sector, one that will encourage green investments and practices, with government maybe providing fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. But as we push for greater investments, projects that are not only economically viable, but also addresses environmental concerns. So here we are this morning, and it reminds me of something that we have shared in our institute last year. Imagine before the end of the year, I wrote this commentary in my regular column in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, and I'd like to revisit this. Enabling collective efforts on the environment through policy and regulatory reforms, while also balancing economic development needs, requires harmonized policies, holistic and practical solutions, sustainable alternatives and operations, and above all, changes in behavior and mindsets. By strengthening partnerships among all stakeholders, government, private sector, the academe, non-governmental organizations, civic groups, the country or the Philippines can work to become a model of climate resilience through a more responsible environmental stewardship. As if I'm writing this today, as if I'm writing this at this time of pandemic, of this strategic surprise. Again, I would like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. I'd like to leave with these final words to welcome you. We risk missing a green economic reset after the coronavirus pandemic. Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to learn from each other and work towards a green economic recovery.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Manhit, for welcoming all of our participants. The latest figure I have is I have over 120, 130 participants so far. So welcome everybody to today's VRTD. So without further ado, I just want to move this on toward and pass it on to our first speaker. But before I do, I think I should also mention that our VRTD today will be moderated by none other than Dr. C.P. David. So we all know Dr. C.P. He's a geologist and professor of geology and environmental science in UP Diliman. He received his PhD in environmental science and geology from Stanford, and most importantly is the convener of PBEST and a trustee of the ADR, Strat-based ADR Institute. Doc CP will come in after Kong Barzaga to ask you a couple of questions, Kong. So right now I'll pass it on to Representative Barzaga, who's the chairperson of the House Committee on Natural Resources. Sir, the floor is yours po.
Good morning to all the participants in this webinar. Let me start by saying that I am a certified public accountant and a lawyer by profession. And because of my professional background, being a practicing lawyer for the last 22 years, prior to my election to a public office, I have been always a keen observer. I have to observe the demeanor of my witnesses, as well as the attitude of the opposing counsels, and even the behavior of the judge in order to succeed in the practice of law. And therefore, being a keen observer, I have observed during the pandemic the following. Number one, the basic rule is that everything has its ups and downs. There will be always advantages and disadvantages. There will be always two sides in a coin. and what would be the good and the bad insofar as the pandemic is concerned. I would no longer discuss the negative side, but I would discuss the positive side. What gains did we have because of this pandemic? Number one, the basic requirement during the quarantine period, we have to stay at home. And staying at home resulted to a closer contact between members of the family, which normally do not happen in cases wherein wherein the members of the family, the parents are working and the children are studying. Second, there was less movement on the part of the people because we are staying at home. And because of this less movement, including the lack of production, we have seen clean air in the atmosphere. We are always staying at home. We are seeing the news. We are watching the Facebook, and we have seen that for the first time in Metro Manila, there was clean sky and there was no smog. In other words, the quality of air improved in spite of the fact that it was not our intention. It is because of the pandemic. No movement on the part of the people, no buses which are smoke belching, no tricycles, no cargo trucks, no delivery trucks, and this would be one of the good effects. And certainly with less movement on the part of the people, we have come to the basic technology that we should be starting to work at home. Classes to be online. When it comes to corporation meetings, it should be by Zoom or by means of video calls. We don't have to go outside in order to shop. We have to rely on online shopping, and all these things contribute to a healthy atmosphere. And finally, we must have, for government agencies, we should start with online applications, online requests, as well online payment, and finally online approval. This would have less movement on the part of the people. This would be having less people on the streets and vehicles. I think that would be the modern trend insofar as the pandemic issue is concerned. And finally, the basic problem would be the internet connection. We have a very slow internet in the Philippines. These online applications, together with the video calls, online shopping would be very hard if there is no fast internet in our country. While it is true that there are so many service providers, we have PLDT, we have Globe, we have Converge, we have Dito. Naturally, based on experience, we have that seen a steep competition among them. Practically, they have uniform charges to the disadvantage of the people. And perhaps this would be the time that the government should take a look in order that internet in the Philippines would be faster, would be cheaper, because this would be already a necessity in future government as well as corporate transactions. And having been an elected official for the last 22 years, being a mayor and a congressman, continuously, I've seen the basic problems pertaining to environment. I was fully aware of the decision made by the Supreme Court in the case of Puposa way back in 2008. And of course, the subject matter would be the cleanup of Manila Bay. I would recognize the efforts having been done by the Department of Environment Undersecretary Shimato. Unfortunately, the basic problem is that in order that we can solve the problem, we have to look at the root cause of the problem. While it is true that there has been already a remarkable improvement insofar as the waters in Manila Bay are concerned, nonetheless, we were not able to address properly up to the present the natural bodies of water going to Manila Bay. These natural bodies of water are the one carrying the trash and garbage to the Manila Bay. And based on the decision of the Supreme Court, we must have a cleanup. Unfortunately, we have a wrong policy insofar as cleanup of rivers and estuaries are concerned. The people are aware of the basic rule that there would be no relocation, there will be no demolition and no relocation. And that is the problem being met by local government agencies who want to clear all the river banks. We cannot transfer, we cannot relocate the people unless we have a relocation area for them. And this is one thing which we have to address. Of course, the National Housing Authority was mandated to provide relocation. Unfortunately, due to lack of funds and perhaps lack of area, we were not able to achieve this purpose. I've been always saying that there is no easy solution. There is no instant solution to any problem. There is no easy road to success. However, as I have stated, and based on my personal experience, I always remember that passage that a journey to 1,000 miles begins with the first step. We have made not only the first step, but several steps, but it is still a long way to cross before we can reach the ideal environment atmosphere which we want. For this to be successful, we have to be united, and all government agencies, including the private sectors, must contribute for our desire to have a healthy and green environment. Thank you to all the participants.
Thank you, Congressman Barzaga, for that. At this point, I'll pass it on to Dr. CP, who might have a couple of questions for you, Kong. Dr.
Hi,
CP?
everyone. Good morning, Congressman Barzaga. From what I heard from you, as well as from Professor Manhit earlier, it seems that everyone is on the same page by saying that this pandemic, which affected everybody, the worst thing that we will do is to just go back to the things that we were doing before the pandemic. You mentioned something about more online transactions, not only for commerce, but probably perhaps also for government agencies. Are there plans from Congress to implement such projects or programs so that government basic services given by government are now online?
Well, of course, we know for a fact that we have the executive branch of the government. And when it comes to the implementation of the basic programs, as well as the plans of the government, insofar as local government units are concerned, they have to rely on the Department of Interior and local government. On the part of the Congress, what we have to do is to provide the necessary funding in the General Appropriation Act. In other words, it is the executive which makes the plans. Insofar as the agencies of the government are concerned, they just submit to us the plans and submit to us their proposal together with the funds which are needed. And that would be the job of Congress to enact the necessary legislation. On the other hand, there are so many local government units which right now are proactive in this case. For example, my former colleague in Congress, Mayor Rex Gatchalian, I have been always watching in television interviews his plans for the city of Valenzuela. And perhaps what is being done in Valenzuela can be replicated in local government units. And the local government units can only do that if they have sufficient funding. Of course, we have also to rely on the help of the national government when it comes to internet access, most especially the DICT Undersecretary Punasan.
And Congressman, being the former mayor of Dasmariñas, Cavite, are some of these plans that you mentioned, like what they are doing in Valenzuela, are they also being implemented in Dasmariñas with the help of yours truly, of course?
Well, of course, we are making already We are already starting with some of these plans, like the online applications. But the basic problem is that we must have a backbone in order that our people could have a ready access to the online applications, to the online requests, as well as to the action of the local government unit. As a matter of fact, I want this policy to be enforced in the entire Philippines because in this particular case, there would be no contact between the city officials and the taxpayer, thus avoiding any corruption. Most especially if the payment would be online, then you can see how much is to be paid together with the receipt. The less contact between the city officials and the people themselves, that is one way of avoiding or minimizing corruption in the government.
Thank you, Congressman. Back to you, Paco.
Thank you, Kong. Thank you, CP. I think actually one of the big problems that LGUs are facing and people are facing when it comes to internet connectivity is the cell sites. People think that there are environmental and health risks associated with the building of these cell sites. But anyway, that might be a topic for a different VRTD. But anyway, at this point also, I wanted to remind, and I forgot to do it earlier, that you guys can ask, the participants can actually ask questions to our speakers. And to do that, all you have to do is click that Q&A button at the top of your screens, and then type out your questions, and we'll see them, we'll collect them, and we'll pass them through Dr. CP so that the speakers can get your questions as well. So yeah, that said, I think let's just move this on. We're doing good time. Next up, we have, as a speaker, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources Undersecretary Juan Miguel Cuna. USEC Cuna is the USEC for Policy Planning and International Affairs for the DENR. USEC Mitch, please, some insights and words from you.
Morning, Paco.
Thank
you very much.
Welcome.
Good morning to everyone. Allow me to first of all greet Professor Dindo Manhit and Dr. CP David of the Strat-based ADRi Institute and PBEST for inviting us to this virtual roundtable discussion as one of your research speakers. I'd like to greet also Congressman PD Barzaga, the Chairman of Natural Resources in the House of Representatives, my colleague Undersecretary Anate, and the rest of the resource speakers. Good morning. The declaration of the global pandemic due to coronavirus really caught us all unprepared. And right now, we are settling for whatever available solutions that are coming our way. We are still coping with the situation and adjusting to what we now call the new normal. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused numerous impacts on the environment and the climate. And due to the restricted transport and travels during the lockdown period, there has been a significant fall in the fossil fuel use, which has reduced air pollution, and there's also a reduction in the emissions of greenhouse gases. But as we know, and as expected, since the restrictions are slowly easing up, all of these are starting to build up again. The pandemic manifested chronic effects of human activity on wildlife resources and habitats, as well as damaging impacts on environmental and public health. In the new normal scenario, managing pollution and sustainable use of natural resources, coupled with addressing the threat of future pandemics under a changing climate, has become more challenging. Our transition to the new normal prompted government to be anticipatory in planning and forward-looking. Numerous voices from all sectors of society have suggested that the recovery period is an opportunity to drive the transition to a new socio-economic model that is climate neutral, resilient, sustainable, and inclusive. We must forge a path towards green economic recovery. There will be more demand for indigenous plants and animals for pharmaceutical use, water supply for sanitation purposes, and wood and non-wood products for the construction of quarantine and shelter facilities. There will be an overwhelming increase in the volume of wastes from healthcare facilities, business, commercial establishments, and even households. The new normal requires innovative, scaled-up actions and solutions to curb the environmental, climate, and health risks. The Interagency Task Force for Anticipatory and Forward Planning has released a We Recover as One report, wherein the priority policies and strategies for the new normal were established. For the environment and natural resources sector, we will pursue the following. First, streamline the management of healthcare and infectious waste, especially at the community and household levels. Second, prioritize the protection and conservation of natural resources, particularly in degraded hotspots and critical ecosystems. And third, ensure water security, especially in COVID-19 pandemic affected areas. The department has also been studying possible legislative actions, some of which are first, the amendment of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act or Republic Act 9003 to bridge the policy gap between municipal waste management and healthcare waste management. Also, another one is the amendment of the Wildlife Act to strengthen mandatory quarantine protocols for confiscated animals and institute greater penalties for poaching, trade, and consumption of wild animals to prevent the spread of zoonotic pathogens such as bacteria and viruses. So these are just some of the legislative measures that we're looking at. For the department, we will also push for the following programs that will pave our way to a green economic recovery. One of the flagship projects of the department is the National Greening Program. In our bid to ensure the income and other benefits derived from the forest rehabilitation activities are directly received by family beneficiaries, the DNR has decided, through this was the idea actually of Secretary Simatu, to depart from the usual practice of tapping people's organizations in implementing such activities under the National Greening Program. The family approach modality would entail, this is what we have decided to use now, the family approach. This would entail engaging local families in the implementation of forest rehabilitation activities under the NGP, with each family given a 5 hectares minimum of forest land area to develop under a contracting arrangement for a period of 5 years. We expect to have around 16,000 families that will benefit from seedling production, plantation establishment, and first-year maintenance and protection. Each family will earn an estimate of around 8,172 pesos per month from seedling production, 3,633 from plantation establishment, and 1,033 pesos from first-year maintenance and protection. Please note that the above projected income per family does not reflect income that may be derived from cash crops, fruit trees, and other agricultural crops and livestock raised as part of the agroforestry system. Another activity would be the harvesting of established plantations. So we expect to be able to have around 10,841 families benefit from this. The commodities involved here, mostly high value crops, coffee, cacao, fruit trees, and then bamboo. In order to assist the family beneficiaries in getting a reasonable price for their produce, they will be given assistance in market linkaging and product development in coordination with other government agencies such as the Department of Agriculture. The Forest Management Bureau is now crafting guidelines on benefit sharing mechanisms and partnership with private sector to ensure that plantations will be managed sustainably and that our partners in development will equitably get a share of the benefits thereon. The department also would like to intensify forest protection. So we are set to hire about 819 forest protection officers and 636 bantay gubat with a monthly salary of about 8,000 to 8,500. They will be engaged in intensified forest protection activities. Capacity building, of course, will continue to be undertaken and to further equip these forest protection officers and bantay gubat. Moving to the mining sector, the department is actually already facilitating the declaration of Minahang Bayan in different provinces, where small-scale miners will be allowed to operate legally and generate income while enabling the government to monitor and regulate their extractive activities. For the large-scale mining companies, there are companies which have been suspended for quite a while right now, and we are actually fast-tracking already the review, the assessment, and the validation of these particular companies to determine if they are now compliant and will be eligible to resume operations to provide the much-needed employment and revenue for both the national and local government. In streamlining the management of healthcare and infectious waste, we will allow the expansion, or we're actually pushing for the establishment of more TSD facilities. These are treatment, storage, and disposal facilities which treat hazardous waste. Because we have observed that the hazardous waste collected during this pandemic has approximately doubled that which were being collected prior to the pandemic. So through the expansion of the TSD facilities and requiring temporary TSD facilities in hospitals and maybe quarantine facilities, we will be able to address the concerns regarding hazardous waste management. With regard to wildlife trade, we are stepping up the enforcement of the existing laws. We will continue wildlife protection programs such as the Protected Area Development and Management Program, and we will implement proper wildlife handling protocols and train more wildlife caretakers in health and safety measures. With regard to water security, through the National Water Resources Board, which is a attached agency of the DENR, we will be accelerating the implementation of the National Roadmap for Water Security. We will fast-track the development.
Yusek Kuna, you are on mute. You're going on mute. Technical issues. There you go, Po.
Yeah. So we will also push for the implementation of the Water Demand Management Program. To assist in the recovery of the ecotourism in the country, of course, as mentioned by Congressman Barsaga earlier, we are continuing with the rehabilitation of Manila Bay, and we will take into account his comments earlier. I think we have met with some level of success, both for the rehabilitation of Boracay and Manila Bay, mainly because the approach has been a really multi-stakeholder and interagency approach, and this has been very helpful. We are very thankful for everybody who has contributed to rehabilitation of both Boracay and Manila Bay. And we have actually given instructions to the regional offices to step up ensuring compliance with environmental laws of the primary tourist destinations. This is the best time to do that, since there is little to no activity in many of these prime tourist destinations. So with these proposed actions, the DNR believes that we can recover from the effects of this pandemic. The need to join forces to support financial and social reconstruction in the wake of the pandemic crisis is necessary. In the long run, through cooperation and collaboration, and with the road to green economic recovery, we believe we can achieve environmental sustainability. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Yusek. Doc CP, you might have a couple of questions. I saw one or two come in for Yusek. Mitch, you might want to ask, or your own as well, of course.
Good morning, Yusek Kuna.
Good morning, Doc CP.
It seems that DNR is still working at the same pace, even with the COVID pandemic or during the lockdown, and that's good to hear that you have all these plans for the different sectors of the environment. For scientists all over the world, they have been reporting improvements in the quality of the environment because of the lockdown over the 4-month period. The challenge now for us, Yusek Mitch, is how to sustain those improvements in air quality and water quality. Perhaps even our forests and wildlife have somehow recovered because of the lockdown. That's the major challenge, and I think new strategies will have to be employed. And I don't want to say it bluntly, but it is actually a good opportunity for the DNR to implement drastic changes in how we manage the environment, and say that it is because of the pandemic. No, it's a complete reset. One of our listeners actually wanted to know more about DNR's concrete plans for solid waste management. No, RA 903 is a good law, but implementation is obviously an issue. So Marco Tenafrancia, one of our listeners, is asking, you mentioned about TSD facilities that need to be constructed. What about landfills in respective LGUs? What's the plan for that?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Dr. CP, and on one of our listeners also. Actually, first of all, just to go back to 9003, we're still, of course, espousing the 3 R's, so reduce, reuse, recycle, and we're trying to focus on waste minimization. But at the same time, we understand the problem of the many local government units, and I think Congressman Barsaga will bear me out, having been a former mayor. There has been a lot of difficulty because under the law, if we revisit, you know that solid waste management is under the jurisdiction of the local government units. But of course, the department is at the forefront of providing technical capacity and education and information. No, but it's not been easy for the LGUs in terms of looking for disposal facilities, particularly because, first of all, if we look at the requirements for a sanitary landfill, you need a lot of space. And many of the LGUs either do not have the space, do not have enough funding to put up a facility, or both. So around 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, I remember there was a proposal already for cost sharing of the national government and the local government unit to put up the landfills. But unfortunately, that did not push through. But I think there's another proposal to do that, to make it easier and to study the use of particular landfills by several LGUs, because a lot of the people we've spoken to, local chief executives lately, I mean, actually spearheaded by Undersecretary Benny Antiporta, since he's in charge of solid waste, that's their difficulty. Their budget is so limited that the amount that they can allot for solid waste is not so big. And if they have to transport their solid waste to areas which are quite a distance from their LGU, they're having difficulty. So there's a proposal again for to put up landfills with the help of the national government, of course. And then I'm sure you've been hearing about reviewing the possibility of alternative technology, also like the waste to energy technology. So these are things that are being studied right now by the department also. But of course, we continue to push for, I mean, there are members of civil society who are listening now. And then there's still, of course, that push for zero waste or waste minimization, just to lessen whatever comes out of your household and your offices, so that we don't need to look for disposal areas.
Yusek Mitch, one of the effects of the lockdown is to actually source everything that you need within your general vicinity, not just because of the mobility issues. Perhaps we can say to our LGUs that it's the same thing with looking for landfill sites, within their immediate vicinity, because it's still the issue of not in my backyard mentality, other than funding, of course. If we say that like during the pandemic, we have to source everything within your own resources and not expect other entities and beyond your LGU, for support. A similar question was actually brought to our attention by one of our listeners, Jefferson Chua. Did you also see an upsurge in the use of single-use plastics? Now, if you have information, because in other countries, apparently this has increased, as a part of our solid waste.
Are you referring, Doc
During
CP,
the
to
pandemic,
pandemic?
yes.
I apologize, but I don't have statistics on that right now. But I would assume that the situation here would have been similar to that of other countries.
Yeah, all the more reason that we need to fix the gaps in our solid waste management plans. Okay. Finally, Yusek Kuna, you mentioned many things, not the tree plantation drive of DNR. I think it's a good strategy. No, there are still a few laws that inhibit commercial tree plantations. That's why many of our people still resort to cutting down trees in our forest. No, for example, for bamboo, I'm not sure if we remove the issues with bamboo, having all the permits needed when you cut and transport bamboo.
I would actually, with regard, thank you very much for that question. Secretary Simato is actually very keen on expanding the planting of bamboo. So part of the process, the Forest Management Bureau is now reviewing the streamlining of the processes for that, in particular because we aim to really pursue more plantation of bamboo, because through the many seminars and workshops that the Secretary has attended, he's actually very impressed with what we can do with bamboo. So he has given instructions to focus a lot on bamboo. Actually, Undersecretary Te, myself and Yusek Jonas Leones have been assigned by Secretary to study this the forestry sector, and then particularly we've been discussing on bamboo and how to push that it be included more in our programs such as the National Greening Program. So the streamlining of the processes for the production of bamboo is already being studied by the FMB right now.
That's good to hear. One inhibiting law is the transport permit for bamboo being treated like any other lumber. No, so if we relax that for bamboos, then there would be more people. They will be more interested in planting bamboo and utilizing it as an alternative to hardwood.
Yeah.
Siguro I'll ask the same questions later to Yusek Annalisa later. All for now, Yusek Mitch, thank you for all the work that you're doing in DNR. Back to you, Paco.
Thank you very much, Doc CP. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek Mitch. Thank you, Doc CP. Next up, we're lucky enough that we have two of DNR's undersecretaries with us today, in addition to the chairperson of the House Committee on Natural Resources. Next up, we have our second Yusek for the morning, Yusek Annalisa Te. Yusek Te is the Undersecretary for Climate Change at the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Yusek Te, floor is yours.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Let me put context on my discussion on environmental stewardship and green economic recovery by asking this question. Is there any connection between the coronavirus and climate change? Why in the midst of a pandemic and economic slowdown discuss about climate change? Aren't environmental issues primarily about health? The food we eat comes from the animals, our biodiversity, the air we breathe from our surroundings, our environment. They affect the quality of our life and our health, so health is inextricably linked with that of animals and environment. Human health has always been influenced by climate and weather. changes in climate and climate variability, particularly changes in weather extremes, affect the environment that provides us with clean air, food, water, shelter, and security. The warming of the climate is one of the principal drivers of the greatest and fastest loss of species diversity in the history of the planet, as shifting climate patterns force species to change habitats, push them into new regions, or threaten their food and water supplies. Human impingement on natural habitats, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem degradation, or our failure to protect nature, has increased the risk of infectious diseases emerging, and warming temperature due to climate change exacerbates such risks to health. Seasonality and weather are major factors that control the rate at which viruses such as the flu infect humans. Although scientists are currently uncertain how climate breakdown will impact the spread of COVID-19, research predicts that rising global temperatures will alter the timing, distribution, and severity of disease outbreaks. So as you can see, climate change can be a threat multiplier. So where are we in the climate crisis? The scientists have warned about global warming hitting the point of no return. Average global temperatures have risen by almost 1 degree centigrade because of increased human activities. Levels of carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are at the highest that they have been at any point and are still increasing. The planet is getting warmer by 0.2 degrees centigrade per decade, according to a report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published in October 2018. Reports say that it could rise by 3 to 4 degrees centigrade by the end of this century if carbon dioxide levels are not reduced. And if this tipping point needs to be delayed or tackled, we must limit carbon emissions to keep global temperature rise to less than 2 degrees centigrade within this century. When COVID-19 outbreak happened, as mentioned by Congressman Barzaga and also Yusek Mitch, pollution and greenhouse gas emissions have fallen across continents as countries try to contain the spread of the new coronavirus. Just to put on some figures, a number of different analyses show that emissions this year will fall by 48%, somewhere between 2 and 3 billion tons of warming gas. That's between 6 and 10 times larger than during the last global recession. Due to lockdowns imposed, there was dramatic reduction in the use of transport, including air travel, and transport makes up 23% of global carbon emissions. Driving and aviation are key contributors to emissions from transport, contributing 72% and 11% of the transport sector's greenhouse gas emissions, respectively. Of course, no one would have wanted for emissions to be lower this way. A global pandemic that is claiming people's lives certainly should not be seen as a way of bringing about environmental change either. Besides, it is far from certain how lasting this dip in emissions will be. What will happen when the lockdown is lifted or pandemic eventually subsides? In fact, recent news saying that carbon emission is fast increasing again. So what does this mean for the environment and natural resources sector? Yusek Mitch has mentioned the priority policies and directions as reported by or proposed by the IATF. But basically what we're trying to say is that managing pollution and sustainable use of natural resources vis-a-vis addressing the threat of future pandemics under a changing climate become even more challenging. So let me just skip these slides, those slides pertaining to the IATF priorities, and go through the challenges of environmental stewardship. In the current health crisis, we should ask questions like, how do you promote sustainable development when the economy is in its lowest? How do you pursue climate action and promote recovery that is low carbon? As we move towards addressing the effect on the economy, the government will have to develop a recovery package that will stimulate the economy. And the question is, what kind of recovery plan should the government adopt? A report entitled, Will COVID-19 Fiscal Recovery Packages Accelerate or Retard Progress on Climate Change was published last May 2020. I hope you can see the graph on the slide. It surveyed more than 200 of the world's most senior economists and economic officials from finance ministries, central banks, and other leading organizations. It tested 25 fiscal policy types in terms of one, how long it takes to have an economic impact, and two, how the effect of the investment on longer term national income measured by economic multiplier. On the slide are bubbles representing the 19 recovery policies, in the interest of time instead of the 25. The horizontal axis shows the multiplier. The policies with higher long-run economic multipliers have greater economic impact per dollar spent. And the vertical axis shows the potential climate impact. The color represents the speed. The lighter the color means faster. Faster policies achieve their desired economic impact more quickly. And policies with positive climate impacts are likely to support efforts to achieve net zero emissions. And the size of the bubble showed the number of experts rating policy in top 10. So please look at the right-hand side or corner of the quadrant, which shows the most preferred desirable policy based on the survey. So if you can guide the cursor, you have their S to refer to connectivity infrastructure investment, X on general research and development spending, L on education investment, Y on clean R&D spending, T on clean energy infrastructure investment, and a portion of N, worker retraining, portion of M on healthcare investment. So these are the policies perceived to have a high economic multiplier and strong potential to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So the authors emerged with the recommendation of 5 policy items, including those specific to low and middle income countries, to contribute to achieving economic and policy goals. And these are clean physical infrastructure investment in the form of renewable energy assets, storage, green modernization. 2, building efficiency spending for renovations and retrofits, including improved insulation, heating, and domestic energy storage system. 3, investment in education and training to address immediate unemployment from COVID-19 and structural shifts from decarbonization. 4, natural capital investment for ecosystem resilience and regeneration, including restoration of carbon-rich habitats and climate-friendly agriculture. And 5, clean R&D spending. According to the authors, the climate emergency is like the COVID-19 emergency, just in slow motion and much graver. Both involve market failures, externalities, international cooperation, complex science, questions of system resilience, political leadership, and action that hinges on public support. In the Cabinet Cluster on Climate Change Adaptation, Mitigation, and Disaster Risk Reduction meeting held last May 20, 2020, Cluster Chairperson and DNR Secretary Roy Simatu instructed NEDA, Climate Change Commission, and DNR to formulate a green recovery plan. We need to look closely at recovery packages from the perspective of long-term strategy for and transformation towards sustainability. We need to create better systems and structures that can respond to the climate crisis. Dealing with the long-term climate emergency will not come from shutting down the economy, as the coronavirus has done. It will come from restructuring systems to enable people to live in a low-carbon way, such as investing in sustainable infrastructures to ensure long-term impact on sustainability. We need both significant government policies and important personal behavior changes. Governments everywhere will need to intentionally design economic recovery packages that support the most vulnerable and promote innovation and clean technologies as the moving force of the economy. We need to compare policy responses to COVID-19 with the climate change emergency and look for synergistic opportunities. Synergies between emissions reduction and broader well-being objectives such as reduce air pollution and improve health, increase the incentives for early mitigation action, action. Investments in COVID-19 response and in climate change resilience must work together and reinforce each other rather than compete for resources. Nature-based solutions where we use the forces of nature itself to achieve economic resilience for food and water security, reduce physical risk for flood control, coastal protection, and ecosystem health, and reduce carbon emissions through carbon sequestration and avoided emissions should be adopted. Research and development support can greatly enhance the growth potential of recovery investments. New technologies can be facilitated by bold government R&D programs, as China and Germany demonstrated with wind and solar energy after the 2008 financial crisis. International efforts to support new energy sources such as green hydrogen and better batteries, along with a range of nature-based solutions to achieve lower costs and more resilient infrastructure, can be crucial in sparking a new cycle of sustained and equitable growth. This is where private sector partnership becomes necessary. So as we deal with response to the pandemic and the recovery path, we can actually transform this into challenges. We need to ask, how do we find opportunities in this crisis? This crisis that we are all unfortunately confronting provides us the opportunity to rethink, reevaluate our directions, our choices for the economy, for the environment, for humanity. And how do we do it? We need to see clear signs that the pandemic and our societal response to it will lead to significant and permanent changes in the path of future global emissions. We need to analyze our responses to pandemic through a climate lens. We can in fact convert this crisis into opportunities to accelerate climate action. And in order to do so, we need to reimagine our relationship with nature. We need both significant government policies and important personal behavior changes, as I mentioned. So times of change can lead to the introduction of lasting habits. During the coronavirus outbreak, those habits that are coincidentally good for climate change, as mentioned by Congressman Barzaga, might be traveling less or perhaps cutting down on food waste, as we experience shortages due to stockpiling and reducing non-essential consumption. COVID-19 in the short term is radically altering our lifestyle, and for climate action, we need long-term cultural and behavioral shift. But then again, substantially changing behaviors requires, as a general rule, structural changes to the choice architecture in which individual consumers make decisions, such as regulation to ban certain activities or products, or large price hikes, or new infrastructures. The climate crisis has not gone away, and our response cannot be put on hold. The enormous impact of the COVID-19 crisis on human well-being and health cannot allow the world to be diverted from a strong response to the climate and nature crisis. If anything, it reinforces the urgency of that response. Maraming salamat po, and keep safe, everyone.
Thank you, Yusek, for the insight. Doc CP. Hi,
Good morning,
Doc CP.
Yusek, Annalisa. Yes, good to see you.
Great, great.
See you, sir.
We got two questions, related questions in our Q&A box from Kendrick Faronillo and Ms. Ling Claver. When you mentioned about reducing our carbon emission, we actually saw that with less transportation happening in Metro Manila and more of pedestrianization of our communities. No, people are now walking, and the use of bikes even in highways. How do you think can DNR help with, of course, with DOTR to promote this? Because it is one sure way of reducing carbon emission. How do we promote more biking and pedestrianization?
Yes, well, first of all, we need to tackle the basic, that is the promotion of mass transport system, and we hope that we can really make a headway on that. No? And then second, on the promotion of pedestrianization and the promotion of bike lanes, I think this is something that we are discussing in the cabinet cluster on reviewing our urban urban zoning, so that we can properly
Yeah.
plan out, plan this out, and ensure the safety of our pedestrians. As I mentioned, it would really require a radical or a major policy change on the part of the government, because we need to restructure things.
Mhm. It's good that you are part of the cabinet cluster, no? Because DOTR might just be looking at efficiency in mobility, but not looking at it with the lens of lower carbon emission, which is what DNR is saying. No?
Yeah, but actually in the Clean Air Act, they know DOTR is the lead agency in terms of reducing our improving our air quality. You know, the role of DNR is more on monitoring, and but the enforcement is also a coordinated effort with DOTR and MMDA. So the DOTR is aware that in improving the mass transport system, they are actually addressing the issue on improving air quality.
Mhm. And thank you, by the way, Yusek Annalisa, for giving that connection between the pandemic and the climate situation. They're actually one and the same. One is just short-term, hopefully short-term impact, and the other one, climate change, is will have the same effect, except that it is of longer term, but probably of a bigger impact, no, in the near future. It's very important for people to know that connection, and that solutions to the issues brought about by the pandemic are, many of them are the same solutions for climate change. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you.
Paco, do you have other questions? There are many questions in the Q&A box now. I can't keep
Right.
up with all of
Mhm.
them.
Yeah, actually, Doc CP, you actually led to a good point for me. There are a lot of questions coming in indeed. Thank you, Yusekte. But also in the interest of time, since we are a bit over in terms of the program, is it okay that for our next speakers, and we have a few still, that we just, we will collect, we have a team that we will collect and sort these questions, and then maybe after a few speakers, maybe after some of our civil society participants, will ask the questions along
That's a good
to all
strategy.
civil society groups.
Yeah. So if some of our speakers can still stay on in the webinar, so I can ask some of the questions from our audience to Yusek Te and Yusek Mitch, and even for
Right.
Congressman Barzaga. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So actually, thank you. And hello to, at this point, we have over 200, is it how many? 250 participants, I think. So I imagine even more questions will be coming in the next few minutes. But next up, we have Dr. Marlon Era, who's an associate professor at the La Salle University and project director of Social Development Research Center. Dr. Era actually just wrote as well a special study for the Institute. So I mean, I'm glad to see him here again today. Dr. Era, the floor is yours for your insights on today's topic. Hello,
Yeah,
po.
good morning, everyone. Professor Manhit, Strat-based family, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this forum. To our distinguished speakers, I think it's a privilege listening to the thoughts and insights, especially of the efforts of the national government. So I'll be sharing my reaction more or less on the topic which I am familiar with. I'm not very familiar with forestry, but I'll be dealing more with the solid waste management. So I'll be focusing my thoughts on an alternative to our discussion in this new norm, which is an environmental leadership stewardship in the local context. So interesting question to ask, and maybe this is something that we can focus on. How can a local environmental stewardship initiatives be designed or supported to make it more effective and appropriate in this resilient new normal. So in other words, as they say, it's a cliche, think globally and act locally, no? But I think it still matter this time. So what will be the factors that will enable or hinder an effective local environmental stewardship? So I was able to get information from advocates of this stewardship. And if you talk about local environmental stewardship, this is the actions taken by individuals, groups, or networks with various motivations and levels of capacity, specifically to protect or care responsibly the use of the environment and in pursuit of environmental and social outcomes. Local environmental stewardship focuses on three major components, and I'm referring to actors. Who are the actors? What are the motivations and what are the capacity? So stewardship actions are carried out by stewards, which can be individuals, it could be professional networks, I think civil society organizations, or actors. Individual stewardship actions, for example, might include decisions on a daily basis, like will I throw my face mask in the in the garbage, or will I put it in a separate container so that when it will not be mixed with the domestic waste, or will still matter, for example, during this time, if I observe waste segregation. Anyway, everyone is busy looking into the present problem. So who cares about doing waste segregation? Okay. Stewardship actions can also be executed by collective groups, no, or communities. For example, I would say the homeowners association. Uh, Now they have a problem because the residents are disposing face masks in the garbage. Now the question is, how can they do some collective action to ensure that all the used face masks will be collected properly, no? So it will prevent, or it will more or less solve some of the problems that the national government is facing, or the local government is facing. Okay, and of course, how can we encourage this time? Thank you for emphasizing the 3 R's. No, the 3 R's is still work. No, so, and I think during this time, do we still do that collectively? So in identifying who should be the key stewards, no, sino ba yung dapat na steward? So it was proposed to have this lens of the subsidiarity. No, subsidiarity suggests that decisions and actions affecting interests should be carried out at the lowest level of organizations possible. No, of course, they should have the capacity to do it. The second component of local environmental stewardship is the capacity to steward. No, whether individuals or communities are able to steward the resources. So there are two important questions. One is available by local community assets, and the other one is there a governance, existing governance? So for the capacity of local communities, scientists would suggest that look into the 6 capital assets when you assess the capacity of the local stewards. They're referring to social capital, referring to trust, networks, cultural capital, financial capital, physical capital, human capital, and institutional capital. So why is this important? No, according to study, it is important to look into the infrastructure, technology, financing, levels of wealth or poverty, rights, knowledge, because these are all supportive of the capacity of the community to take a stewardship action. Okay, so the other one, aside from the assets or capital, is the governance. No, so including systems of institutions and decision-making processes. No, so I'm happy to hear that Yusek Kuna mentioned about the streamlining of the hazardous waste and solid waste management. While there's still a prevailing problem on yung sanitary landfill, okay? Yung implementation ng material recovery facility, okay? But I just want to highlight the point that I think it's not required that every LGU should have a sanitary landfill, no? Kasi it's because of the difficulties of the space, yung funds, at the same time the NIMBY syndrome na sinabi ni Dr. CP, no? But I think during this time, I think it's interesting that the national government is looking into how to bridge the gap between the municipal waste and healthcare waste. No, kasi this is the pressing issue. How we didn't realize that we will be generating this much of healthcare waste or hazardous waste, no, which never happened in the history of the Philippines, no, and this is a very challenging, I think, issue for the government at this point in time. The last one, actors, we have the capacity, and the last one is the motivations. No, so even when the stewards have the capacity, some individuals or groups choose to steward resources, while some do not. No, so depende sa motivation. So the question is, what then drives people or groups to take a local stewardship action? So stewardship motivation might be defined simply as the reasons or incentive that drive people to take action to care for the environment. So at this point in time, yung cleaner air ba would be yung sinabi ni Congressman, will that be enough motivation? Yung less traffic problem, I don't know if that is true kung hindi na masyado matraffic ngayon, but I suppose this is nalilesen yung problem ito because of the not because of but I think it's spontaneously it happened that way. So and of course I think these are some of the questions that some of the developments that are interesting happening. So in the end, I would like to in this forum, I would like to end with a question. No? So how can the different stakeholders, the private sector, the academe, the government, and the people in general, could effectively promote or support a local stewardship effort? So this might not be the perfect solution, but I think people in the local communities will be able to do something, without waiting for the national government to address the problem. So it's like the bibingka effect. No, we're doing something at the bottom, and then the national government is pursuing its other initiatives. So I think that's an interesting question to ask in this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Era. Thank you, Dr. Era. I was just about to pass it on to Dr. CP, but I remember that I said that we would go on to the next speaker. So, Dr. Era, thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Ludwig Federigan, who's the Executive Director for Young Environmental Forum, and who is also a non-resident fellow for Strat-based ADR Institute. Mr. Federigan. There we go.
Good morning, Paco.
Good morning. Good morning, sir.
I can see you too. Good morning, Dindo. Good morning to Strat-based family, to our friends in DNR and in the House, and to my friends who are from the civil society organizations. I have a very brief narrative to share with everyone today. Trying to compress everything within the time that is allotted to me. No? So let me start by hold on. Okay. We know that after over 3 months of the self-isolation and social distancing, the entire capital region remains to be under a general community quarantine. Perhaps this is a welcome development for some, but nothing to rejoice yet, because GCQ is not the new normal that most of us are thinking. We have to admit that while staying at home and working from home pose a challenge for all, we may have helped in lessening the spread of the virus. However, the latest figures reported to the public says otherwise. Most of us here would agree that the economy took a beating during the last 3 months, and this state may continue for the next months. Based on the study prepared by the National Economic and Development Authority, the estimated initial impacts in terms of losses on our gross domestic product would amount to 1.1 trillion pesos, around 80% of which would come only from two regions, no? Basically the National Capital Region and the Calabarzon area. The COVID-19 pandemic is different from the global financial crisis that happened over a decade ago. And no crisis is the same. Hence, the lessons learned in this pandemic have to be always remembered, no? Especially in guiding our policy. No? First, let me just share with you that after all of these things would end, we would realize that we are all connected. Human health and the health of our common home go together. This pandemic reminds us that our total well-being and the health of this planet are closely related. Over decades, there has been continued calls on humanity to curtail environmental destruction and caution that a great challenge or great change in our stewardship of the earth and the life on it is required. A vast human misery is to be avoided. Unfortunately, we continue to cut down trees, we continue to poison the soil and the water, and we continue to destroy entire animal and plant species. Even despite of scientists' warning on animal-borne infectious diseases, we destroy natural habitats that pushes wild animals much closer to humans. Second lesson of this pandemic, COVID-19 caught us by surprise. We are not ready. We have not prepared enough. No? We are unprepared to deal with the impacts of the major global health or global threat to human health. With the continued intent to flatten the curve, our health system remains overwhelmed with the exponential growth of reported cases. 2 days ago, the Department of Health reported the biggest single day of the positive cases. Third is the health threats like COVID-19 and the climate emergency cannot be isolated. It requires both local and global cooperation. Climate change and diseases are problems without passports that cannot be stopped at the border. A faceless virus like COVID-19 cannot be stopped at the border, and likewise climate change does not recognize any national boundary. We are facing real emergencies as these play as our common enemies, also highly considered as national security threats. Both crises can only be tackled with global cooperation to include transparency in terms of information from regional, national, and local levels. Fourth will be government response. We know is key in the crisis, but private sector plays a very critical role. We know that commerce has long acted as a bridge builder between nations by connecting cultures and people, by spreading knowledge, mutual understanding, and economic benefits. In the post-COVID era, the world will remain interconnected, and our dependence on each other will be the most sustainable way to secure our coexistence. The private sector plays a critical role in this pandemic-shaken world, where our policymakers may have forgotten the lessons of history and ignored the common interests that we shared as one humanity. Many well-managed companies have put the health and safety of their workers, at the same time have donated collectively billions of pesos to address the socio-economic plight of the vulnerable members of this society. The fifth and the last lesson that I would like to share with everyone, it is time to shift gears and embrace systems change. The COVID-19 pandemic made it very clear that human health and the health of this planet are really interconnected. If we do not address the climate emergency, considered now as the most important environmental issue in the world, we face the dark consequences of welcoming a number of pandemics, perhaps much severe than the present. If we continue to blink our eyes in strengthening our health systems, we are unable to respond to both COVID-19 and climate emergency, thereby pushing more of our people to experience death. We have three global frameworks. These are Sunday Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Agenda 20 on Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, with the goals that should govern us on our post-2015 development arena. This framework should continue to guide us to rethink our policy positions. A recent study made by Ipsos revealed that majority of citizens globally agree that it is important for our governments to prioritize climate change in their post-COVID-19 economic recovery plan. We will drive our planet much deeper into the existential economic, social, and ecological turmoil caused by the climate crisis if our governments fail to make our economic stimulus sustainable and equitable. As we continue to flatten the curve for COVID pandemic in a whole of society approach, we should keep in mind that we are running out of time in flattening the curve for climate change. The call for ambitious actions to cut carbon emissions should be more pronounced now than ever. Responding to this pandemic and the climate emergency calls for all of us, on top of our individual initiatives, to confront the vested interests that oppose transformative change and to end the business as usual thinking. We can build back better and emerge from this crisis stronger and more resilient than ever. But to do so means choosing policies and actions that protect nature so that nature can protect us. Hence, in designing our recovery plan, we should aggressively push for a green recovery, one which have the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and where it sets the economy on a pathway towards a low carbon development. We know that without a green recovery plan, emissions will continue to rise and the goals of the Paris Agreement will be impossible to meet. A green recovery plan is necessary to address climate emergency. Our green recovery plan, having environmental stewardship and the balance between health, climate change, and economic prosperity in mind, should focus on, these are just my suggestion, on 4 areas. One, we have to put more investments to our healthcare, and that should include national laboratory systems, real-time surveillance, workforce development, preparedness, emergency response operations, risk communication, and national legislation, policy, and financing. Second, we have to strengthen our disaster preparedness. Third, we have to allot more funding for clean research and development spending. And last, we have to continue to pursue renewable energy infrastructure investments. In a new study entitled Sustainable Recovery Plan, based on the rigorous analysis made by the International Energy Association in cooperation with the International Monetary Fund, achieving 3 main goals such as economic growth, creating jobs, and building more resilient and cleaner energy systems is not only possible, but rather highly recommended. I urge our policymakers present here today to look into this sustainable recovery plan. Based on the said plan, it recommends that we set out policies and targeted investments in key sectors. Number 1, accelerate the deployment of low carbon electricity sources like new wind and solar, and expansion of and modernization of electricity grids. Number 2, increase the spread of cleaner transport, such as more efficient vehicles. Number 3, improve the energy efficiency of buildings and appliances. Number 4, enhance the efficiency of equipment used in industries such as manufacturing, food, and textiles. Number 5, make the production and use of fuels more sustainable. And number 6, boost innovation across energy-related industries. Hence, in closing, I believe that green policies often have advantages over traditional policies. And I also believe that climate positive policies offer superior economic characteristics. So thank you very much and good morning again.
Thank you, Ludwig, for that. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was Mr. Ludwig Federigan from the Executive Director of the Young Environmental Forum. Next up, we have Ms. Nazreen Camille Castro. Ms. Nazreen Camille is the branch manager, or is it the head of the Philippine branch of the Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. Welcome, Naz. It's good to see
Hi,
you again.
Paco. Yes, thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, it's called the branch manager. Sounds like a bank, huh? So, yeah, good morning, everyone, especially to our online participants. I would just like to greet my former family, Stratbase, and Professor Dino Manhit, Paco, Sir Orly, Sir RP, Yusek DNR was also my former home, and Ludwig Federigan from the Climate Change Commission, and also a climate reality leader. Good morning. So the COVID-19 pandemic and economic lockdown has caused massive global disruption and uncertainty that will continue for many months and will have implications for economic growth, the financial well-being of people, governments, and both public and private investments. This pandemic gives us an opportunity to rethink our old approaches and ways, especially in terms of how we could further incorporate the principle of sustainability in all our systems and operations. Despite this turmoil, we have the window of opportunity to jumpstart the economy that can reduce pollution, generate employment, provide access to cheaper and domestically sourced energy, restore the environment, and lead sustainable lives towards a healthier, safer, and much better normal. The Climate Reality Project is essentially a community, people from all walks of life with a shared aspiration of solving the climate crisis. What for me is the strength of the organization is in the formation of climate reality leaders who are the ones who advance ambitious climate action in their respective countries and also localities. The Philippine branch has almost 600 Pinoy climate reality leaders from across the different regions in the country. And we are expecting 100 more, probably 700 more this coming July after the global training that will be led by former US Vice President Al Gore. Within this community, there are leaders who focus on areas such as food security, policy, energy, education, health, water, marine conservation, and so on. But of course, the foundation of these is really the environmental stewardship. The role of the branch is activating the robust network of our climate reality leaders to push initiatives and solutions. It's about bridging our climate reality leaders and elevating their actions with other advocates, policymakers, and movers to support and institutionalize their efforts. Three focus areas I want to tackle today are waste, mobility, and energy. The Philippines, having acceded to the Paris Agreement, recognizes that sustainable lifestyles and sustainable patterns of consumption and production play an important role in addressing climate change. First, the Philippines can benefit a lot in a circular economy since we produce a lot of waste daily that tend to end up in our oceans and the fish we eat. Let me provide a few statistics. In 2019, a report by the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives revealed that Filipinos use more than 163 million plastic sachet packets, 48 million shopping bags, and 45 million thin film bags daily. So this is even before the pandemic. In terms of food waste, Filipinos waste around 308,000 tons of rice every year. And in Metro Manila alone, around 2,175 tons of food scraps end up as waste, mostly coming from restaurants. How much else is lost on water, feeds, labor, and other resources that go with food preparation and distribution? In 2000, the Republic Act 9003, or the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, is enacted. So it was principally authored by now Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda, who happens to be a climate reality leader herself. It was considered a landmark legislation on environmental management and became a model for other countries. But 20 years after its enactment, many LGUs are still behind in their implementation of the law, as we have discussed earlier. So the estimate is that only 1/3 of the 1,540 local government units are really implementing the law. A proposal perhaps is a complementary policy guidelines or a policy directive that could make the companies shoulder the burden of proper waste disposal and not only the consumers. So second, our potential for sustainable urban mobility initiatives to help address air pollution and curb carbon emissions is massive. We have been in a traffic crisis even before the pandemic. We need to realize that the main objective and also the solution is to focus on moving people, not cars. So we have seen bicycles in the new light during this pandemic. There are 88% of Filipino households in Metro Manila alone who do not have cars, and they can only move through protected and interconnected bike lanes within the metro and neighboring areas. So I believe the National Capital Region should lead this movement, this change for a better normal. So other localities, other cities in other regions and Visayas and Mindanao can follow suit and learn from the mistakes of the National Capital Region. Lastly, recently the Monetary Board of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas approved the Sustainable Finance Framework to set a precedence for banks to start pricing climate and transition risk, and also valuing climate resilient and low carbon opportunities. This is a much welcome policy directive. The pandemic provides an opportune time for the Philippines to delay the building of import-reliant coal plants. The rapid drop in the cost of renewable energy has opened new possibilities in energy systems around the world, especially for the Philippines. The Philippines is not only well-positioned to take advantage of deflationary renewable energy, which can reduce overall system costs, but it can also take advantage of the co-benefits that arise from first, price stability, localized employment, and system resilience. So before I end my reaction and my sharing, I just want to complement and add to what Dr. Era said, that we, the civil societies, the public, the private sector, do not need to wait for the government to act. However, what we need from the government is a clear policy direction on where we should go during this pandemic and most especially post-pandemic. So thank you.
Thank you, Naz, for that, for your insight and for sharing your ideas. Next up, we actually have with us Mr. Joel Palma. Mr. Joel Palma is the President and CEO of WWF Philippines. Mr. Palma?
Hi, good morning.
Hello.
You hear me
Good
well?
morning. We do, loud and clear.
Okay, just some thoughts. First of all, thanks to ADR for inviting me again. I always like to be part of this, interaction, and I learn a lot. To our thought leaders from government, thank you. My former colleagues in DNR, Yusek Kuna and Yusek Te, and also our friends in the civil society. I'm sort of just having some thoughts for this. No, I have nothing really written, but in the past few years, I've just realized that we were all talking about disruption. Facebook came in, internet came in, and everybody was trying to go into this bandwagon called disruption. And what more disruption can we get when, late last year and up to this point in time, we probably could define this as the greatest disruption ever. And many have said about the positives, the negatives, but at the end of the day, we all know that we are all connected. This is part of what's happening to our environment. And the health is obviously situation is a major part of our disregard to our planet. As I've mentioned in previous interactions with ADR before, that we are living beyond the limits. In fact, last year we were consuming 1.7 planets, and we only have one planet. So what this pandemic has actually taught us is to be more basic and fundamental. We were not able to go to malls. We were not able to buy things are not necessarily because we already have them, like probably shoes or clothes, because at the end of the day, I think we have more than enough. So that's why this is driven by consumption, and that's why we're doing 1.7 planets, and we only have one planet, and we are running on a deficit. So again, this pandemic told us to just work within the limits, and as shown, we have lesser emissions, we have lesser pollution, and but the sad thing is that the economy has been affected. I'm sure we have some representatives from the private sector would give more inputs on this. I know Vicky Tan is here as well. But as in the Philippines, probably we can say, or even globally, the economy is propelled by consumerism. And the more we consume, the better for the economy. But at the same time, we're talking about waste and waste management. The more we waste. And we're talking about waste management, how to contain it, how to manage waste. But I guess more importantly is that how can we reduce waste so that we don't need to manage waste? So these are my thoughts. And I'm not an economist. My training is on fisheries, so it's quite far off. And probably that's why you see my background. This is Tobataha Reefs. But I came across with this German-born British economist, Schumacher, and he said, "Small is beautiful." And true to sense, we have to limit our consumption, and go back to that one planet consumption limit, because we're right now 1.7. A lot of previous speakers, reactors have provided all the solutions, but I think it starts from the individual, the family, the country, and of course globally. I also read in one article that the most sustainable country in the world is what? Probably but I was surprised when I read this. They said it was Cuba, because Cuba has been so isolated for such a long time. They were just living and using within their means. In fact, even the health report that one of the best health systems in the world is Cuba. So this is not driven by wealth, but this is driven by how we manage our consumption and how we also manage our production. So I guess this is where we're coming from, or where I'm coming from. But again, if you go one planet consumption, the economy will obviously be affected. And I think this is the greatest challenge. And my take here is that we should look at equity. We all know that, like the United States would consume, if all Americans would live like if all the 7 billion people in the world would consume like an American, we would need 7 planets. I'm not sure about the figures, but their population is about 350 million, less than 5% of the population, but I think they consume about 30%, 20% of the resources in the world. So this is equity. In Manila alone, 30% of the food that is produced is wasted. But at the same time, this is from production to the plate. But at the same time, in Metro Manila alone, so many thousand tons of food is wasted on a daily basis. And I'm pretty sure this was during pre-COVID situation. So I think I'd like to end that with 3 major points. 1, we are over the limit, we're 1.7. Whether in energy, waste management, food production, and everything, we have to manage that. We need to manage our consumption because we waste a lot. That's why we're putting a lot of resources and energy on how to manage waste. But if we just reduce the waste, we don't need much resources to manage waste. And lastly, obviously, to pare it down to one planet consumption, the economy, the people will be affected as we've seen right now. So we need more economists, sociologists, and everybody to work together how we can have a new world order that would play down equity so that whatever resources we have, everybody would sort of have a fair share so that everybody can live sustainably. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. Mama. Next up, we have Miss Angela Amante. Ms. Amante is the team leader for advocacy on liberalizing policies on tree plantation of the FEF, Foundation for Economic Freedom. Angela, hi.
Hi,
The
hello,
floor is
good morning,
yours.
everyone. Yeah, I'm Angela Hernante. I'm here to give you a brief walkthrough on our tree plantations reform advocacy. And I would like to thank the ADR Strat-Based Institute for inviting us to share this with you. Paco, I'll be sharing a PowerPoint. Can you enable me to share a screen? To share my screen?
Sure thing. Sure thing. We'll get that to you right now. Guys, we have a team in the background who handles these sort of things, so you'll get access soon enough. Let me just
Sure, no problem.
yeah.
Okay, just to give you a brief background, we've started the study in 2019. We've had several focus group discussions and consultations with stakeholders when we were conducting a study and drafting the reform. So, and I'm presenting to you a brief overview of that reform.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect. I'm told that you can share.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint?
You can. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So here's the context of our reform. We do not have enough wood to meet our needs, the Philippines. So these needs refer to paper, wood fuel, furniture, and construction materials. In fact, starting 2006, our wood supply here in the Philippines is not able to meet our wood demand. And in fact, 75% to 80% of wood supply are imported. So why is this the case? We think here that people are not planting enough trees. So here's the Philippine forest cover starting 1898 to 2015 from 17.5 million hectares by the end of the Spanish era here in the Philippines to 7 million hectares in 2015. Also, okay, here's the land area of the Philippines, which is 30 million hectares, more than half of which is dedicated to forest lands. These are the lands for public domain, and the other 47% are private lands, which means these lands can be owned by private citizens. So here's the composition of forest lands now. 40% of forest lands now are dedicated for protected areas, 34% for ancestral lands. The remaining 11% have no tenure or still unclassified, while 15% is dedicated to production forests. Production forests refer to the forests where we get our wood, our lumber, our timber, and only 15% of the forest lands dedicated to that. So what we can do is to maximize the remaining forest land, the remaining 11%, by establishing tree plantations and promote the establishment of tree plantations as well in private lands. Here in our reform, we protected areas and ancestral lands will be untouched. So to make the establishment of tree plantations attractive for investors, we have to ease some rules. As mentioned a while ago by Yusek Kuna, he mentioned that DNR has some initiatives to streamline transport rules on tree plantations, specifically on bamboo plantation. Okay, but here what we're pushing for is the streamlining of rules for tree plantations, a source of lumber, timber, etc. Okay, so here are the current rules. When you want to put up a tree plantation on public land, of course you have to secure a tenure instrument. For you to secure that, it has to be approved by the DNR DNR central office. Our proposed reform is to delegate the approval of that tenure instrument to the regional level. Now, when it comes to harvesting trees from public land, prior to harvest, you need to conduct 100% inventory, which could be costly and time-consuming. And also, after that, you have to get a cutting permit. Our proposal is to just reduce the inventory to 5%, adhering to the revised forestry code, and get rid of the cutting permit. Now, when it comes to transport, for example, you have to transport your harvested wood outside of the tree plantation area. You also need to get a certificate of timber. Now, our proposed form is to replace that with a certification saying that your wood that came from tree plantations are legal and did not come from natural forest, because now we're banned harvesting and processing woods from natural forests are banned with EO 23. Okay, so now what if you have a 50 hectare of land in your backyard and you own it? So you want to put up a tree plantation in your private land. So what do you have to do? So again, for this one, you still have to secure a tenure instrument and has to be approved by the community level DNR office. Our proposal here is to remove this requirement and treat your own tree plantation in your private area as a business, or treat it the same way as you would treat a vegetable plantation, where you don't have to secure a lot of documents to put it up. Okay, when it comes to harvest, it's pretty much the same when you want to harvest from public land. So here you also have to conduct 100% inventory prior to harvest, and you need to have the cutting permit approved by the DNR regional office. Our proposal is to reduce the inventory to zero. No need to the inventory to zero, meaning no need for an inventory, and you'll also be getting rid of the cutting permit. Now, when it comes to transporting these trees, you have to secure several forms again, and you have to secure it from the community level DNR office. Our proposal here again is to replace it with a certification, just to make sure that your product, your wood products, did not come from natural forest or are not illegally sourced. Now, from tree plantations, let's move on to wood processing plants. For example, you don't want to put up your own tree plantation, but you want to put up a wood processing plant. So what you have to do? One regulation that we want to amend, is to delegate the approval of the permit of putting up a wood processing plant to the regional level, or if not, treat it as a regular business and include environmental impact assessment if needed. So also, we want to make sure that we're also protecting our forests. So we believe in this mantra, we harvest what we plant. So we believe that when we put up more tree plantations, it will be able to reduce pressure to use tree products on protected areas and ancestral lands. And it will reduce illegal logging activities, since trees will be readily available in plantation areas. We think that these few policy changes can lead to increased investments in tree plantations both in forest lands and especially in private lands. So here, these are some of the benefits. First, it would increase forest cover. It will help us meet the local wood demand. It will help us provide jobs, especially to the uplands where poverty and insurgency are rampant. It will also help in supporting some of the government programs, such as the Build program and the Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa program. And of course, tree plantations are profitable. Now, there's a draft DNR administrative order being prepared for approval, and we would like to ask for your support in facilitating the approval of this draft DNR administrative order. The title is this one. So basically, it aims to promote and liberalize tree plantation policies here in the Philippines, specifically on the harvest and transport regulations. So here are the salient points. First, if you want to harvest your trees, implanted trees in a private land, you don't need to conduct 100% inventory. Second, if the trees will come from public land, we have to adhere to the 5% inventory requirement of the revised forestry code. Third, again, if you want to transport the wood products outside of your plantation area, you need to secure a certification just saying that these wood products are legal and they come from tree plantations. Fourth, we want to allow tree plantation owners to establish their own wood processing plant so that they don't have to get through the hassle of securing transport permits. they can right away process the harvested wood in their area. And lastly, the policy aims to establish a tree plantation certification training. Okay, in June, last June 1, 2020, the Joint Foreign Chambers, some Philippine business groups, and the Philippine Wood Producers Association, the Society of Filipino Foresters, and the Sustainable Tree Farmers Group of the Philippines came up with a joint statement of support supporting the DNR, draft DNR DAO policy. If you want an access to the policy, I can give you a URL. I can post it in the chat box. And we hope that you could help us push this reform forward. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Arnante. Thank you so much. At this point, if you recall earlier, I was saying about my concerns with time, but I think we have a few minutes now for Dr. CP to ask some questions to our, if you noticed, if you saw the program, it's more or less our speakers from the civil society and academe and think tank sector. So with that, Dr. CP, do you want to
We have
ask
time, Paco.
them some questions? I think for one or two questions, maybe.
One or two questions, no? No, I was just intently listening to all our speakers, and they particularly speak about the tenets of the green economy, which are number one, efficient use of resources. Number two, ensuring ecosystem resilience, including the natural environment, of course, and social equity. No, they all revolve around that. In particular, what I picked up from Dr. Era's talk was the importance of local initiatives, which I think is sometimes relegated to something that's not as important as national policies, no? But I think it's a very important and valid point. And I think the stewardship issue that Dr. Era was speaking about, the main motivation is really the need, you know, because we are in a different scenario right now, and therefore they're motivated to do something about it. And if we can cultivate this and increase it in terms of aerial scope, then we will be in a better place after this. There were really good suggestions, no, for forestry, and even Ms. Castro was talking about clear policy directions from the top, but everyone knows that policies are only as effective as they are implemented on the ground. No? So that is still an issue that we have. I'm looking at our Q&A chat window. Okay, very general questions really. Maybe one question for Sir Ludwig. Ludwig, are you still there?
I'm still here, Doc.
Yeah, hi Ludwig.
Hi,
You
sir.
mentioned something na parang okay, napaisip tuloy ako, and this is the role of the private sector, no, in all this, and not just for the coping with the pandemic, but also climate change, no, in general. Can you give examples for how the private sector, obviously, it's not government, we cannot govern private entities, but how do you think can the private sector collectively have an impact in terms of solving these problems?
In more cases than one, in more cases than one, we know that private sector, I mean companies, no.
Pero collective, Ludwig,
Yeah,
not
collective.
Individual companies.
Yes, collectively, they normally have what we commonly call corporate social responsibility. That's very common, especially to big corporations. No, at first I am for one. having come from the private sector for 2 decades, sometimes I'm quite skeptical with some CSRs of the private sector. I feel that some CSRs are being done simply because they have to project. I mean, they have to put a good projection in terms of marketing. No? But on the other hand, I feel that if private sector, especially the ones that are very deeply involved with their CSRs, and would convert these CSRs into sustainability projects and eventually embed all of these sustainability concepts within the entire operations, both front and end. I believe that it would collectively, I believe it would deliver good results.
Okay.
I've seen that one with, of course, when you read, for example, the sustainability report of Ayala, when they do their community transformation, and we would be able to see that sometimes when we do their forestation projects, they would really do measurement, how many carbon they can really sequester. I would know that for one because I did a review of a sustainability report of one conglomerate, and to put forward a suggestion on measuring the carbon sequestration that they did, for them it's somewhat a challenge still, considering that they earn billions of pesos in a year. So you can see contrast, whether yung CSR talaga nila embedded sa operations, or whether these are really for marketing purposes only.
Yeah, as you know, Ludwig, we are in the process of crafting a parang framework for the sustainability reports of corporations. Many of these large corporations still hire foreign consultants, if you believe me, to do their sustainability reports, as if there are no experts here.
Correct.
Here in the Philippines. And then finally, Paco, I have a question for Angela and Nazrin. I don't know if you can answer this with real examples. Angela, you mentioned good policy measures for the forestry sector. And Nazrin talked about clear policy directions from the government. Pero alam naman natin ang problema yung implementation. So what do you think can we do with the implementation part? We can propose all these good policies, but if it's not implemented properly, then there's corruption, inefficiency in the process. Perhaps your groups have a clear idea on how we do this. Angela?
Okay. In our part, of course, this is just these are proposals, and we're happy that some of them were adopted by the DNR DAO. We actually went to visit a tree plantation and a wood processing plant in Agusan del Sur earlier this year, and we've mentioned to them about this plant policy. What we got the feedback, and also from other tree farmers group that we've talked to, they said, although marami pang kailangang ayusin for tree plantations and forestry in general, but at least they see that if we ease the harvest and transport policies for tree plantations, I think they said that it will produce a big impact, but not right away, little by little, and also because we're relying on the market to decide what's going to happen for the next months or years when the policy is approved.
So I guess what you're saying is that when we craft policies, we should have in mind if they are implementable or not.
Yes, that too. So they have to be.
Sometimes we forget that. Okay, they're all good, but hindi pala implementable. And then Nazrin, that's exactly what you were saying.
CP,
earlier.
I'm sorry. I think si Naz cut out. She has technical difficulties yata with her internet.
Okay, when she rejoins, she was mentioning about policy directions, which are all good, As Filipinos, we're good with crafting policies, but when it's time to implement them, that's where we fail. And it's good that we have people in government like Yusek Analisa and Congressman Barzaga probably just a reminder that some of the policies, they're good but not implementable. So it has to be really part of policy crafting.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah, all for
Dr.
now,
CP. And
Paco.
great. Yeah, and I just wanted to add that I think that's why it's also important that we have events like this, and we have a place, a space where people can come together, discuss these policy uh, reforms that we want, and we have, thankfully, government officials who are willing to listen. That said, I think it's now time to move on to some perspectives from the industry stakeholders that we've invited today. First up, we have Ms. Jonah Delumen Pernia, who's the Director for Public Affairs and Communications at Coca-Cola Philippines. Jonah, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Paco. Good morning, everyone. Can you
Morning.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, what a rich discussion we've had so far. And what I realize is that the speakers are so diverse, but there's consistent trend on two things: a path towards green recovery and the importance of a whole of society approach. Now, as the first private sector reactor, the question for most of you is probably this: will companies uphold their environment and sustainability commitments amidst real business challenges and fundamental things such as cash flow? That's always been the discussion so far on this space. Now at Coca-Cola, we believe that sustainability initiatives cannot be a nice to have, and it cannot just be about philanthropy. We cannot slow down just because there is a crisis, and a crisis actually magnifies environmental issues even more. Thus, we work towards integrating, and I think Dr. Ludwig also mentioned this, about the need to integrate our sustainability goals into the business to ensure that as companies grow or even contract, the environment is protected and the environment continues to flourish. On this note, there are two areas of sustainability pivots we've done for Coca-Cola during this pandemic that I would like to share with you. The first one is about water. With this pandemic, we all know that access to water has become even more important given its role in hygiene and sanitation. Water replenishment has been core to our business as Coca-Cola for over 13 years that we've done water replenishment initiatives. To date, we are proud to say that we have given back 120% of the water we use to make our products. This means we return every single drop of water and more to the environment and to the community. And we do this through water access programs, watershed protection projects. WWF Joel is our partner in that one. And at this time, what we could have easily done is just do the same initiatives. But what we've decided to do is refocus our initiatives to the imminent needs post-pandemic. We decided to move our water access programs from rural areas to urban high-risk areas post-COVID. We shifted our programs from ramp pump systems to community-led water distribution systems. And now we're even working on hand washing stations for schools, transport stops, wherever there is need for hygiene and sanitation. As you can see, we didn't slow down. There was no need to slow down or deprioritize. These programs are still true to our company focus, but we have adapted to what the people really needed at this time. Now, the second case I wanted to share is on the topic of plastic waste, and some of the speakers already started talking about this. Similar to our goal on water neutrality, we also have a goal towards packaging neutrality. We have set a goal of collecting and recycling every single bottle we sell by 2030. Yes, we want every single bottle back because we believe they should not end up in the wrong places like in landfills and oceans. Thankfully, half of our business is in returnable glass bottle. A lot of people are still quite surprised with that. And thankfully, too, the plastic bottles that we use have value and can be recycled to furniture, shirts, or even back to bottles again. This is the value we see. That's why Coca-Cola has invested in a 1 billion recycling facility here in the Philippines, and that will be in Cavite. And amidst the setbacks of the crisis, we are still forging ahead on this initiative as this is a critical piece towards a circular economy. Now, what we noticed too is that the crisis also posted a challenge on the informal waste sector due to the lockdowns. These are the waste pickers who couldn't go out, junk shops and aggregators also stopped operating. Thus, they did not have any income. We know that the informal waste sector is the lifeblood of the recycling sector, so we need to help them restart. We want to stimulate their livelihood again and at the same time stimulate the collection of recyclables. At Coca-Cola, we began supporting these initiatives. In fact, we have programs in 16 provinces, 31 projects, but we need to support them more. And we are looking for more, so if anyone is interested to partner, I'm happy to connect. As I end, I circle back to my question earlier in sustainability. Should it take a back seat during this crisis? The answer is a clear no. Sustainability initiatives needs to be accelerated, redoubled, and given focus, especially during a crisis. The ongoing debate has always just been about health versus economy, lives versus livelihood. But given the richness and depth of this discussion, it is clear that it cannot be just those two levers. It needs to be about health, economy, and environment. All are interrelated. As they say, there is no planet B. Thus, it cannot just be about lives and livelihood. It also needs to be about the life of the planet. So with that, thank you so much, Nindo and the ADR Institute and all the speakers for this opportunity to participate. And as I mentioned, I look forward to connecting with any of you who are interested on possible partnerships. Salamat po.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Jonah. It's nice to hear about the initiatives that Coca-Cola is taking during this pandemic. Next up, we have Miss Melody Del Rosario. Ms. Melody Del Rosario, hi po, I can see you on screen, is the Vice President for Public Relations and Corporate Communications at Metro Pacific Investment Corporations. Ms. Del Rosario, please, I see your presentation is up. The floor is yours, yes.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. Allow me to thank the Manhit of Stratbase and Stratbase ADR Institute and our friends from the Philippine Business for Environmental Stewardship for the opportunity to share what MPIC has been doing for the past decade in terms of environmental stewardship. Through our Metro Pacific Investments Foundation, we only have three main pillars that guide our CSR initiatives: the environment, education, and economic empowerment. ShoryTop is MPIF's flagship environmental program for social responsibility and environmental sustainability. We have institutionalized programs such as the Marine Protection, Inspection, and Conservation Gardens in Puerto Galera and Medina, Misamis Oriental. We also have our legacy project through the Mangrove Propagation and Information Centers in Alaminos, Pangasinan, Del Carmen in the island of Siargao, Surigao del Norte, and coming soon in Cordova, Cebu. We have worked with Business for Sustainable Development to measure the impact of our carbon sequestration, which is equivalent to 24 passenger vehicles driven for a year. In our journey, we learned to help coastal communities employ better and more sustainable marine, environmental protection, and conservation practices. We have a total of 11 sites made up of municipalities and provinces. Our volunteers for our simultaneous nationwide coastal cleanup numbers to about 88,000 volunteers. We have not been doing this alone. With the aid of Tulong Kapatid, the Alliance of Foundations and Companies under our chairman, Manuel V. Pangilinan, MPIF was able to seek out communities that have received little or no social amelioration from the government or other organizations. We reached out to vulnerable sectors such as senior citizens and the disabled, pregnant breastfeeding mothers, indigenous communities, informal settlers, homeless individuals, and displaced laid-off workers. Our unwavering support continued in terms of monthly salaries and allowances during the pandemic through the 36 Marine Protection, Inspection, and Conservation Gardens, including the 6 mangrove eco-guides in our mangrove centers. When tourism transformed the economies of sleeping, fishing communities, opportunities for employment in the hotel and hospitality industries mushroomed everywhere. It gave an alternative livelihood from the dwindling catch in our ocean, ravaged by illegal and destructive fishing practices such as dynamite and cyanide fishing. Perhaps it gave vibrancy to the communities for the younger generation, but some of the practices sadly continues to this date. With tourism on a halt, we have now seen coastal communities going back to the ocean for food. A case in point is our prolific catch in Medina, Misamis Oriental, due to the active monitoring and presence of the marine guardians. A hook and a line fishing near aggregate devices can yield up to 8 to 10 kilograms of fish. The biggest recorded catch thus far was 100 kilos of tuna. In Del Carmen, Siargao, both tour guides have shifted back to farming and fishing, and the mangroves provided the needed sanctuary for the thriving mud crab industry as an alternative livelihood. On the ground, a partnership with local farmers through ADRi's Move Food initiative was formed. COVID-19 pandemic hit their peak during harvest time in March, and farmers were unable to sell their produce to the food industry. So the situation paved the way for us to help and create an equally beneficial network for farmers and our beneficiaries. We shortened the supply chain and provided healthier and more nutritious options for our relief pack beneficiaries. Since MPIF targeted to help as many families and communities as possible, we believe that our little effort of using eco bags and water buckets for relief packs will lessen our waste footprint. Together with our board of trustee Romy Trono, we are also talking to various stakeholders in Mabini, Batangas to help our tourism workers. Aside from relief pack distribution, MPIF also aims to move forward into the new normal through Oplanilao, a program to provide financial aid for coastal resource management by the Making Plastic into Cash program. As passionate underwater scuba divers, we visited our house reef to see how the ocean is healing, and to our amazement, visibility has greatly improved. Varieties of fish and nudibranchs are easily found undisturbed. Corals are actively spawning. Nature is slowly healing itself. As the lockdown turned the tables, and if there's anything positive happening during the pandemic, it is about healing our planet. And now I am drawing this from an emotional standpoint. Perhaps we should demand for a worldwide month-long lockdown each year as our new normal to give Mother Earth a break, as all mothers need to. Nurturing cannot take place when there is nothing else left to give. I remember reading in the internet that civilization has driven animals to hide and stay away from humans. Now that humans are hiding in their homes and the environment is now quieter, cleaner, safer, animals are slowly reclaiming their domain. The earth is healing because we are the virus. So what you see here is Pawi, our Pawikan mascot. The COVID-19 pandemic has rightly pivoted our focus on health, safety, and food security. However, we must not forget our responsibility to the environment and our natural resources. Going back to Metro Pacific Investments Foundation's efforts, we now see a decade's worth of reaping a fruitful harvest, that in taking care of our environmental resources, it will in the end take care of us all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Rosario. Next up, who do we have next? Right. Okay. Here, next up we have Mr. Guillaume Lucci, the President and Chief Operating Officer of Prime Metroline Infrastructure Holdings Corporation. Mr. Lucci?
Yes, good morning. I hope you can all hear me. Pleasure to be here. And first and foremost, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here and a pleasure to be here. And distinguished guests, good morning. So Prime Infrastructure, new company, established in 2017, very much focused on essentially two markets or three markets. I'll say construction, power, and water infrastructure, right? So wanted to give you a little bit of feedback, and then I'll take you through three sample projects that hopefully highlight our approach to doing business and sustainability and the environment. We don't see sustainability as a CSR program. It's a central part of the business model. And then we feel that can be done with profit in mind. So I'll start maybe with WAWA. WAWA is a water project, essentially a project that addresses water security. It's a flagship project of the Duterte administration. And first B2B transaction of this size in the Philippines. It's the kind of project that's obviously critical to Metro Manila's resilience, right? We are so dependent on one water source. In this time of crisis, obviously, we cannot afford to lose existing water source and need to build resiliency and redundancy. It's an area that is unfortunately one of the most in need in the country, at least in Luzon, a number of very difficult areas where people are in need in Rizal. And of course, this COVID-19 crisis has further exacerbated that issue. So we'll be, of course, with a tremendous support from DNR, and want to thank the USECs here present and Secretary Simatu for the continued support, and the national government, other agencies, and the local LGU. We've started a project that will have significant impact, again, on water scarcity and what it implies for health. But as part of this project, we are building a new economic ecosystem. The economic ecosystem is meant to drive resilience and sustainability very long term, looking at development of ecotourism parks, training, educational programs. We're looking at broadcasting the cultural and arts of the local communities, so that we turn this project into the epicenter of attention for hopefully ecotourism within the vicinity of Metro Manila, and build an economic model that's resilient over time. So that's one example. Second example, in very recent days, you might have seen in the press, we've acquired a 50% stake in a solar business currently owned by Solar Philippines Holdings. We're a big supporter of solar power. We feel that we're probably, as a country, about maybe 10 gigawatts away from where we should be in solar power. Why is that? Because we have a day peak that is too high, tariffs are too high, and the whole idea here is to essentially drive renewable energy to flatten the day curve, reduce tariff, and incidentally impact positively not only the environment, but actually the pocket of all consumers, driving power costs down. And doing that with sustainability and environment in mind is obviously not only a good thing to do, but it's paramount importance going forward. The last one I will bring is a project that we're about to launch. And it's a number of speakers mentioned solid waste. We are looking at solid waste, and we're looking at it from the perspective of not waste to energy. We feel that waste to energy, unfortunately for the time being, is overpriced, and we feel that it's not the time to, for the purpose of managing the waste, charge higher rates to consumers. But there's actually models of waste to fuel that are very effective, very cost competitive, do not need subsidies. So we are about to launch detailed work on collecting waste and gasifying and transforming it into a syncrude that can feed anything from the airline industry to the everyday car at cost competitive rates, and essentially in a way decarbonizing the transportation chain, while of course reducing the issue of solid waste, landfills, and everything else. So those are the three examples, hopefully, that gave you a bit of an overview of what we do and how we approach the business, looking at water scarcity, economic or economically viable settings, long-term, and of course, sustainable from an environmental perspective, and of course, power cost reduction and renewables. I will just finish by making a comment that, of course, we all have a role to play in this. As the private sector, we have to invest and keep the long-term focus on that infrastructure to better the life of every citizen. But of course, we need the right regulatory framework and the right support from the public stakeholders on this conference and forum. So with that said, I look forward to interacting with all of you in the years to come, and hopefully to contribute and utilize this opportunity to have a new, much greener and sustainable start to the economy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Guillaume Lucci, for that. Next up, we have the Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer of Morocco, Mr. Raymond Ravello. Ravello, please, sir. Okay, we can see your screen. Powering to be good. Yes, and we can hear you as well. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Paco. Good morning, everyone. First of all, again, thank you to Professor Dindo Manhit and to my good friend RP Manhit and the rest of the Strat-based group for inviting me to be part of this session. Truly been a very informative and highly insightful session so far, and it is a real pleasure and privilege for me to be here and to share with you the Meralco sustainability story, and in a way also share with you how this pandemic has in a way given us a real opportunity to put our words into deeds or turn our words into deeds in this particular area. So I guess let me begin by saying that in 2019, last year, when our then new CEO, Attorney Ray C. Espinosa, took the helm of Meralco, one of his first major thrusts was to ensure that we put sustainability at the center or at the core of our strategy and operations as a company. So given that, following his direction, we have crafted and developed our very own sustainability program or sustainability agenda. And it is a program that is, in many respects, very much rooted in the global thrust for sustainability, which, as we all know, is embodied by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or UN SDGs. No? In particular, we have a prime focus on UN SDG 7, which is the drive to deliver affordable and clean energy. While UN SDG 7 is front and center for us, through our other businesses and initiatives in Meralco, we are able to support up to 10 other SDGs, which you see on the screen. And in a way, that approach of ours is quite reflective of our view on sustainability, which is a very, very comprehensive one. No? In as much as environmental stewardship is a big part of our program, as you will see in a few moments, our sustainability program does cover a lot of other areas which we believe are just as important in order to truly drive a sustainable program. And really our sustainability agenda in Meralco is driven by a focus on 4 distinctive areas. First, and this might not come as a surprise, but power is a big part of our sustainability agenda. We do have an aspiration to provide energy for all, always, and given that we exert all efforts to provide affordable, accessible, reliable, and clean energy to all we serve in our franchise. Next focused area is really people. And here we capture our drive to embed what we call a sustainability mindset in our organization and as much as possible among the stakeholders that we serve, while cultivating a culture of inclusivity and diversity as well. And then of course, we come to planet. No? Planet captures our initiatives to protect and preserve Mother Earth, and we do this through a number of initiatives in the areas of direct emissions reduction, waste management, and also resource efficiency when we talk about electricity and water efficiency. And then finally, really underpinning all of this is a drive towards prosperity, which is a drive to uplift lives, to create better lives for all, particularly with a focus on the most vulnerable groups in society, the youth and the marginalized. So interestingly enough, we were launching this program earlier this year, around end of Feb, beginning of March. Before we knew it, COVID-19 was upon us. And so, as we all know, this pandemic has thrust all of us in a very challenging environment, an environment which in a way poses a grave threat to human life, a grave threat to all forms of human activity, to public health. And so, given the situation, it is even more imperative for a company like ourselves in Meralco to ensure that we keep our services on for our customers, and for us to think about ways to help, even beyond our core services in this time of great need. And so I'd like to think that we in Meralco have tried to do that in the last few months, of course, guided by our sustainability agenda. And so what I will be sharing very quickly are some of the activities that we've undertaken to do that. So again, following our kind of program from a power standpoint, there has been a supreme effort within our company to really, as we say, keep the lights on, and keep the lights on for our customers, particularly for those who are in the thick of battling this pandemic. And in that vein, in the last few months, we have energized and ensured continuous power for over 700 vital facilities, including government agencies, hospitals, and even temporary treatment facilities, such as the ones we see at the Ninoy Aquino Stadium and in the Philippine Arena. Now, in terms of our people agenda, our focus has really been on the frontliners. So in the last few months, we've provided PPEs and food packages to as many as 18,000 frontliners. But beyond that, I think one interesting effort that we've undertaken is we've converted one of our buildings here in our Meralco campus in Ortigas into a temporary accommodations facility for frontliners, for our neighbors in the medical city. No? And so since April 11th, if I'm not mistaken, we've actually hosted a lot of frontliners in our facilities. We've provided them sleeping quarters, shower facilities, meals, and even some exercise equipment, and even some TVs with Netflix to make sure they are in tip-top shape for the battle, so to speak, ahead of them. So that's something that we've also been able to do. From a planet standpoint, and again, very consistent, I guess, with the theme today around the green recovery, we've actually been able to put our green vehicles, no, our electric jeeps in particular, which are being run by our subsidiary Isakay, to very good use. There's a fleet of vehicles that we normally run between Makati and Mandaluyong cities during normal times, but during this pandemic, we've had to stop. But we didn't stop these vehicles. We deployed them actually in partnership with the DOTR and with LGUs in Makati, Pasig, and even Teresa Rizal. We've deployed these electric vehicles to ferry health workers and essential personnel to and from the medical facilities they work for. And these are the likes of Hospital ng Makati, as well as Cardinal Santos Medical Center. So I'm just happy to note that in the last few months, I think we've been able to serve as many as 63,000 frontliners through this effort, and through green zero emission vehicles at that. And then finally, with our drive for prosperity, or like I said earlier, to uplift lives, we've also run a number of internal campaigns, internal fundraising drives, through which we were fortunately able to raise as much as 30 million pesos from 4,000 employees. And the funds from this have gone to providing food packages, gift certificates, grocery gift certificates to some marginalized families through our own foundation, the One Meralco Foundation, and through Caritas Manila. And some of these funds were also used to fund cash donations to our over 6,000 contract workers. And so, I guess this is just a sample of some of the things that we have done and we'd like to continue to do during the pandemic and even post, to the extent that we can. But really, this sustainability journey of Meralco is really just beginning. And in a way, the pandemic has allowed us has provided us a really good opportunity to live out that commitment. So, going forward, we will continue to do more. We will forge further ahead to, as we say, sustain energy for our customers and our communities, help sustain the future of our country as we get on this path to a green and sustainable economic recovery. And ultimately, it's really about for us powering the good life for all. So that's all. Maraming salamat, and have a good day, everyone.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Ravello. Next up, we have from the Chamber of Mines, the Executive Director of the Chamber of Mines of the Philippines, Attorney Ronald Isidoro.
Hi, Paco. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for this opportunity. When I was invited to speak, I initially told Orlin, parang we're not a good fit. No? Mining is not really one you would associate with good environmental stewardship and the green economy. But really, if we took a longer, harder look at it, I think we'll see and realize that mining does have a role to play in the green economy, and there's a lot that we can contribute towards a green economy post-COVID. Mining is one of the oldest established economic drivers of the Philippines. Even before the Spaniards came, ancient Filipinos were already trading copper and gold with our regional neighbors. And it's driven a lot of ancient economies. And today, mining is still as relevant, if not more so, especially in the age of the internet and renewable energy and batteries. Because in this regard, the Philippines is one of the best, most well-endowed countries in terms of copper, gold, and nickel on a per hectare basis. This is an endowment that cannot be ignored and should be seen more as a challenge to be overcome and harnessed. Now, given our significant mineral potential, it also cannot be overlooked that our environmental impacts are significant. Mines have a heavy environmental footprint and thus require heavy regulation and an extensive and complex system of funds to ensure that post-mine, the environment is adequately protected. But that said, there is also tremendous potential for the mining industry to contribute to a green economy, especially in a post-COVID scenario. What do we contribute and what is our potential? It may come as a surprise to many, but mining companies have been implementing a mining forest program for the longest time, decades now, since the 1970s. And in that time, mining companies have planted over 60 million trees in 25,000 hectares. That's 6 times the land area of Manila and about 1.5 times land area of Quezon City. In fact, mining companies have reforested the equivalent of 12 hectares for every hectare that they have dug up and disturbed. That's significant. Under the Aquino administration's National Greening Program, the mining industry has planted an additional 20 million trees, covering over 40,000 hectares. Now that's 10 times the size of Manila and 3 times the size of Quezon City. Imagine, in just 3 years, we were able to plant and distribute enough seedlings to cover 3 times the size of Quezon City. So what am I saying? I'm saying that mining companies can and do create forests. And these forests are not your usual man-made forests because they cannot be cut down anymore. But more than that, when we plant, we create employment for the people in the communities hosting mining operations. And very often, we are able to convert mined out areas to other economic uses, such as agriculture, even tourism, and forestry plantations, as Yusekura discussed earlier. But over and above the planting of forests, there is so much more that the mining industry can do. In the latest PHEITI country report, in 2018, mining companies spent nearly 25 billion pesos. 25 billion pesos for environmental protection and enhancement activities. But most of these were spent mostly on erosion and siltation control, tailings impoundment, and tree planting. We are seeing that these activities, while laudable, we can do so much more. properly guided, mining companies, environmental funds can be channeled and focused to impact not just their immediate environment, but also contribute to the larger ecological and biodiversity protection objectives of the government. How? How can mining companies help reduce carbon emissions and help address climate change? Perhaps through the establishment of a carbon trading market. It's something that we're looking at and we'd like to pursue with government. Secondly, there is exciting work being done, and we are contributing also to this, the establishment and protection of biodiversity corridors, which require linking all stakeholders within the area, not just mining companies, to align their efforts to protect a contiguous biodiversity corridor that will span several provinces. The biggest remaining block of biodiversity corridor is located in the eastern part of Mindanao, spanning from Surigao down to Davao. Fortunately or unfortunately, that area is also where a majority of the operating mines are also located. So there is a threat and there is an opportunity to help. Thirdly, we're also very involved in water quality assurance and management. We're doing a lot of work, our members that is, are doing a lot of work in the area of water conservation, studying sediment flow, and water quality. Fourth is the protection of endemic species to ensure future biodiversity. Fifth would be perhaps looking into the establishment of forest plantations or planting high-value crops, as alluded to by Yusek Kuna earlier. All these activities are something that the mining industry can do or contribute to, all with an eye towards future sustainability in the areas where we operate. Mining companies can do this. Unlike other sectors, mining companies are mandated by law to set up environmental funds. So this is not just CSR for us. This is compliance with law. And perhaps not just compliance, but going beyond the minimums required by law. Mining companies have set up the funding mechanism. In fact, if we were to look at how we reacted to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were able to realign our SDMP funding from our usual social development management programs to reacting to the pandemic. So we shifted our focus from social development projects to providing PPEs and food packs for all affected communities. As of this month, mining companies have already spent over 300 million of their SDMP funding for COVID response. So that's how fast we can act. So the money is there, and all we need really is guidance from government, proper coordination, and perhaps a policy shift from government, because we've noticed that in the past few years, not just from this administration, but also from the previous one, that the policy attitude towards mining has been not one of promotion, but rather more of, well, not really promoting it, but putting it in the back burner. We hope that after this pandemic has settled, that government will take a long, hard look at the mining industry. In closing, I'd like to offer mining as a real and significant green economic driver for the country after this pandemic. We have seen how the pandemic has crippled traditional economic drivers that the country has relied upon. Manufacturing is virtually on a standstill. Tourism is down to zero. BPOs are heavily dependent on the global market. And even if now they're stopped and their future is also in peril. OFW remittances are down and is estimated to go down by as much as 40% next year. On the other hand, the mining industry is almost pandemic proof. We are mining companies, mining projects, are self-sustaining, self-contained communities. We can lock ourselves in and continue operating. In fact, as proof of this, all 48 operating mines have reported 0 cases of COVID infection in the last 3 months. No? We have implemented very strict quarantine protocols within our mine sites that have helped greatly in preventing the entry of virus within our mine sites. More importantly, the pandemic may even be a plus for the mining industry because, as a fact, gold being seen as a safe haven investment, its price is forecast to go up to as high as $2,000 by end of year. No? So government should really look into mining as a hedge against global forces such as the COVID-19 pandemic. More than that is really our potential to contribute to environmental stewardship, environmental protection, and enhancement. We have a system in place that jives very well with environmental stewardship. It leads to economic wealth for not just for the country as a whole, but for the communities hosting mining companies. But more than that, they also lead to capacity building and sustained communities that host these projects. So I'll end there, Paco, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, Attorney Ronnie, thank you as well. It's always interesting to hear, about the role of responsible mining in our, in our economic recovery rather. Sorry. Yeah. So now it's time to go on to our next speaker, Miss Maria Victoria Tan. Miss Maria Victoria Tan. I saw you were one of our earlier members of the panel to join, and you're still here. Thank you. Yeah, Miss Tan is the head of the Group Risk Management and Sustainability Unit of Ayala Corporation.
Thank you, Paco.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Paco, and thank you everyone for inviting the Ayala Group in this discussion. It is always good to hear from other sectors, the government, the academe, the civil society, and from the other private companies that you have invited today. There is always room for collaboration and for partnership in the future. I think many things has been said about COVID-19. It is being a global pandemic. So probably if you can, your team can move to the next slide, please. Yes. That it is actually that we have to remember that before COVID-19, the IPCC called on global leaders to declare climate change as a climate emergency. So for Ayala, we are a member of WBCSD, a global sustainable organization, and they have enumerated 3 global issues: climate change, biodiversity loss, and social inequity. I think the science is very clear. Climate change is a present threat in human lives, health, and economy. There is a chicken and egg situation for climate change and biodiversity loss, but definitely they are intertwined. And it will create social issues later on if left unchecked. The COVID pandemic heavily impacted the vulnerable population, and the same vulnerable population will be going to be hardest hit by climate change. What you see on the screen is our sustainability blueprint. As early as 2015, with the launch of the UN SDGs, as mentioned also by the guy from Morocco, Mr. Ravello, we anchored our value creation process with the 17 goals, which have 169 targets. It's easy to say that we are contributing to these goals, but an internal reflection is needed to answer the questions of, are we really contributing? Are we really making an impact? Or are we really committed? And in 2018, we launched our blueprint, and that will bridge the Filipino to 2030. Next slide, please. In developing the blueprint, we adhered to 5 principles, and that is outside in, what our stockholders needed and what can we offer. Bold leadership, our CEOs are committed to establish systems to achieve the 2030 objectives. Impact at scale, where can we really move the needle? And let's have focus on our targets. And along the way, we realized that we cannot do this without multilateral and multi-sectoral partnerships. So that's the PPP there. We also identified 3 megatrends that affect Filipinos, and those are marginalization, untapped potential, and irresponsible growth. Next slide, please. And in this slide, we will address these megatrends through 3 journeys: access and inclusivity, productivity and competitiveness, responsible growth, and innovation. You can see in this slide that we have SDG champions. So for every SDG, we have a champion, which is a business unit under the Ayala Group. And for all group-wide projects, Ayala Corporation will take the lead. And these are in SDG 8 for decent work. We have about 72,000 employees in the Philippines and globally. SDG 12 for responsible consumption. That's where we are looking at our generated waste. And SDG 13 for climate action. And I think for this presentation, we will be talking more about our initiatives under climate action. Next slide, please. So I think this has been said a while ago, for every plan to rebuild economies, we should embed recovery action with climate action. And this will ensure that there will emerge a stronger economy than before. So across the group, we tackle climate change, risk and opportunities under 3 major strategies. And those are mitigation, adaptation, and innovation. In the following slides, next slide, please. Thank you. These are for the mitigation strategies. For the group, our focus more is on reduction of electricity consumption and improvement of our energy efficiency as a percentage of our revenue. And in the next slide, what is shown on the slide is our adaptation strategy. Ayala Corporation embarked on a group-wide, nationwide forest and biodiversity conservation program called Project Kasubulan since 2016. And I believe this is the first initiative, or probably one of the initiatives, that will use the UN Red Plus methodology in protecting the forest. This is a major initiative that will not only protect the forest, but will generate jobs and support economic activities. In the following slide, a real estate arm, Ayala Land, has set also a carbon neutrality target by 2022. To date, they have about 600 plus hectares of carbon forest in their mixed estate developments, and they actually disclose the amount of carbon emission that they have avoided because of these initiatives. Next slide, please. On the same note, our telco company, Globe, has set another carbon neutrality projects for all its corporate offices. And Manila Water, on the other hand, is continuously assessing the resilience to natural catastrophe. Next slide, please. And on the innovation strategy, through our investment in AC Energy, we set a target of reaching 5 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2025. And we just said that we will be divesting from coal investment by 2030. We are really focusing more on RE and battery storage. Through our bank, BPI, and in partnership with IFC also, we have sustainable energy financing that will accelerate the transition of companies to low carbon economy. Next slide, please. Also, another innovation strategies across the group is really encouraging consumers to do online transactions. And we have seen that through this ECQ or quarantine, GCash mobile application is now the #1 mobile application in the Philippines. Globally, I think #3, third to Zoom and TikTok. And also our BPI mobile application is also gaining traction. I think after GCash, the next most downloaded mobile application is BPI mobile application. Our EMS company, IMI, is also developing smart energy solutions for the corporates and also for household. And through our education arm, we also embed the environmental curriculum and sustainable development curriculum. So as early as a child or students, they can already have the thinking and love for the environment. Next slide, please. And I guess through this quote of our chairman and CEO, the insight on the relationship of people, planet, and profit, he said that in 2017, and I think it's still true until today, that businesses cannot survive in communities rife with inequity and in a degraded environment. Ignoring the challenges faced with the world today threatens our ability to create long-term value and jeopardizes enterprises, markets, and entire societies. That was his quote when he was awarded as one of the 2017 SDG Pioneer by the UN. In the next slide, and I think we have seen a lot of activism from the youth sector. The young generation knows fully well that the generations ahead did not do so a good job of caring for the planet. We see them, we see Greta and the other young children in the slide. And I have also 3 young activists in my household, and they are pushing me to do this thing, even though it will not be probably part of my job, but because of the love for these children, I have to love this earth dearly. And for that reason alone, I would say, and as mentioned also by Jonah a while ago, let us work for the only planet that we have. There is no planet B. Next slide, please. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I'm Tan for that. As we've now come to the point in our program for the open forum. I think I'll throw it over again now to Dr. CP, who has a few questions, especially for Congressman Barzaga and
Yes.
Secretary, who have stayed the whole time.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I just wanted to mention, we still have a lot of participants, so we really should give them what they want.
Thanks, Paco. Quick questions for Congressman Barzaga first. Is Congress or yourself be open to introducing measures to push for green economic recovery? As we have heard from our private sector colleagues, maraming initiatives, no? And it's just right that we do this as a policy as a nation.
Well, definitely it is necessary that there must be the corresponding legislation. But I have to admit that I lack personally the necessary and competent authority to propose the necessary legislation and what is to be incorporated. And therefore, I have to seek the aid. Number 1, I have always asked the Department of the DENR what legislation would be necessary, since they would be the competent body on the part of the executive department insofar as the green environment is concerned. And secondly, with the stakeholders, especially the non-governmental organizations and possibly big corporations like Ayala, Metro Pacific, and others could give us the necessary input so that we can draft the necessary legislation.
That's great, Congressman. In fact, Professor Dindo and Paco, that's probably one initiative that ADR can do. Now we have in our network already our stakeholders from the private sector and from NGOs. It's just a matter of collating all these and distilling it and writing it as a policy recommendation to Congress. Can we do that, Dindo?
Or CP, can I speak?
Sure,
Yes,
sure,
of course.
Yusek.
After
Go ahead.
Dindo. No, after Dindo, after Professor
After
Dindo.
Dindo, okay.
No, of course, this is the role of the Institute to bring people together and develop policy recommendations. So I turn it over to DNR Undersecretary.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Dindo. Well, to respond also to concern of Congressman Barzaga, we have a list of pending bills, mainly on the National Land Use Act, the Sustainable Forest Management Bill. We also have the Carbon Offset Law, which requires emitting companies to rehabilitate certain forest areas. And of course, bills on payment for ecosystem services. I think we can start on these pending bills to push for green economic recovery. Thank you.
Actually, Yusek, Annalisa, you answered part of the question I was going to ask you, and that is how DNR would be able to attract or encourage private sector to invest in green projects and initiatives, perhaps in terms of tax incentives or other forms of incentives.
Tax incentive is quite difficult.
Okay.
So one, we thought of that carbon offset law, and others would be in the form of their, most of our environmental laws require social responsibilities, exercise of social responsibilities by companies. So they can be considered as part of their CSR. And of course, the rest, like I mentioned in the presentation, the research and development initiatives, they can participate there and benefit also from the research of the results of this research and development activities.
Thank you, Yusek. So Dindo, that's another paper that I think we need to craft immediately. Okay. We have just a little bit more time left now for our short discussion. I hope everybody's looking at the chat box. There are specific questions to some of our speakers there, and you can answer the questions directly. I have a question, a general question to our private, to our friends from the private sector. For big companies like Coke and Ayala and the MVP Group, of course, you've always had your sustainability strategy, even before the pandemic. Now, personally, what I wanted to know from your perspective, what were the changes that you had to make immediately because of COVID, which eventually will actually result to a better operation and a greener operation, perhaps? No? Meron bang ganong nangyari? Parang napabilis lang because of COVID that you can share with us? Jonah or Melody, if you have examples, even Dilom, and of course.
So I can, Dr. David, I can comment on that. So this is Jonah from Coca-Cola. So very, very true. I think at the onset of the pandemic, it was the immediate needs of food, PPE. So there were decisions that we made as a company to shift advertising foundation money to these more short-term needs. So I think that's one of the things that we pivoted.
But
the second thing,
beyond the CSR, beyond CSR, and I know all the companies who are in this webinar are doing their fair share, no? But what I wanted to know is more on the operations part, that as you know, a greener operation is a more efficient operation. Meron bang napabilis, something that was hastened because of the pandemic?
Dr. David, may I answer the question?
Sure, Ms. Tan, go ahead.
Yes.
And then I'll go back to Jonah.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
I think it is we have set a plan for digitalization I think in 2018. But with this COVID pandemic, it was fast track. And I
That's
think,
perfect.
yeah, it was fast track. I think there's also a behavior shift from the consumer. Before we have the mobile apps of Globe and BPI, but nobody is taking it. They don't see it as necessary or as important because they can still go to the brick and mortar, right? But with this lockdown, even myself, I'm not a GCash user, but because of this pandemic, I have to shift to that kind of behavior. And I find it very, very fulfilling because I can do my work. I'm working from home. I don't sit in the traffic. That's good. I have to travel 2 hours every day just to get to Makati from my place. But I can still do my online shopping.
And do you think, Ms. Tan, do you think after the GCQ, would the Ayala Corp be going back to regular 8-hour workloads, or mukhang there's a shift already in terms of work from home?
Yeah, there is already a shift. And actually, part of our business continuity management system is to really test whether we can work during disaster, or if the Tower 1 place is not accessible, how are we going to work?
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, and then because of this pandemic, we were able to prove that we can do business as usual. It is just a work and play, play and plug kind of thing, and that it's also fortunate that we see that we have to move everything to the cloud, and I think that's something that probably will help us also understand how what will be the other behavior of our consumers. Definitely, there is no going back to the old.
No going back.
Yes,
Okay,
there's no going
Jonah,
back.
I'll go back to you.
Yeah, so I just echo the same one. Digitization and e-commerce, which was a very small part of our business, was accelerated, so operationally. Now, in terms of environment, sinustain lang naman namin the same things we were doing on renewable energy. We're using half renewable energy in our business, and this pandemic helped us accelerate some of those. And then, as I mentioned, the investment on the first bottle-to-bottle recycling facility, hindi naman nag-slow down yun. So those still continue to be
Continuing. Okay. How about for Metro Pacific? Melody, meron bang changes, big changes?
Hi, Doc. Actually, as a holding company, our programs for community-based efforts are really hinged with the LGU's participation. So more than any other time that we did them, this is really the most opportune time for them to really enforce our partnership together. So instead of sometimes going to their areas so that we also mitigate the risk of being infected, we coordinate with them, and that we are also supporting local communities in terms of yung efforts like relief goods and PPEs, sourcing from the community. So far, that is the efforts we've seen that has changed.
That's great. So getting to know again our stakeholders, our consumers, digitization, continuation of our programs from pre-COVID. VP Ravello, Kusang Meralco, thank you for not having any interruptions in Metro Manila during COVID. It's also the height of summer, so we appreciate it that the services are continuing.
No, I think you're quite right, Doc CP. Summer is usually a challenging period for us, because that's when the demand surges because of the heat, and at the same time, we have to manage, I guess, if any supply issues. But maybe if I may build on some of the things that my colleagues have mentioned, digitization, yes, has really been kind of accelerated. Sabi nga ng mga tao, I think everybody's digital quotient and digital acumen went up because of this pandemic, diba? Kami ganun din, we have a Meralco online app, which just really skyrocketed in terms of registrations in the last few months. which is good because now people are changing their behavior. But siguro if I may take another take on this. One thing that we're also into kasi is transport, particularly green transport. And I think this pandemic has raised our collective sensitivity on respiratory health, which now translates to a greater attractiveness for zero or low emission vehicles. So we've tried to do that in Meralco as early as 2018 when we launched our electric jeepney route in Makati and Mandaluyong. And now I think more and more there is a greater clamor for modern jeeps. And I think we're working very closely with the DOTR to provide support to their PUV modernization program. And I think, this has been discussed earlier, there is an opportunity to modernize our transport systems and also, upgrade our fleets, particularly to low emission or to zero emission vehicles kung kaya. No? And even internally in Meralco, there's been a bit of an accelerated program to transition to green mobility with regard to our own fleet. So hopefully, this.
Good to know that Meralco is also looking into building the infrastructure for e-vehicles.
Yes.
I mean, it's a business for you guys, but it will, in the long run, it will be better for everybody.
Correct. So we're looking to be a real enabler in this space.
Okay. Thank you. And finally, I have a quick question to Attorney Ronnie. Ronnie, as you said, it's only the mining companies that are resilient to COVID. No, walang slowdown.
Yes.
I hope with the help of Yusek Te and Yusek Kuna, we get to resolve some of the issues of the industry, in terms of policies and what do you think? May chance ba tayo for this year?
We're hopeful, no? We're cautiously hopeful that government will take a second look at mining, precisely for the reasons I cited earlier. We are a domestic sector. Now we are not reliant on overseas inputs, and we are producing foreign currency for the country. So there's a lot that mining can contribute to the economy post-COVID.
If there's one thing that we learned from COVID is that we can no longer rely from importation.
Correct.
Because everything stopped, and therefore you have to be sustainable internally. And the mining products are, of course, important in industry. If we build the infrastructure and the downstream economies of mining, then it makes for a good reason for us to revisit mining again.
Well, if government pushes through with their Balik Probinsya program, these people will be needing jobs, and mining companies being located in the remotest areas of the remotest provinces can provide these jobs.
Okay, Attorney Ronnie, good to see you, by the way. Yusek, sige, go ahead. We have a few minutes left.
Yeah, in addition to Attorney Ronnie, more strategic role of the mining sector is in the low carbon path. If you want to go into renewable energy, solar power, you need to mine. And that's something that we should also take a look at. It's another whole discussion.
Thanks, Yusek, for reminding us. At this point, personally, I learned a lot from our speakers and reactors. As mentioned by Congressman Barzaga earlier, this doesn't stop. We have a paper to write, and we will definitely ask for everybody's inputs once Professor Dindo creates a draft, a working draft, and then we circulate it to everybody. Thank you, everybody, and I'll turn it over back to Paco and Dindo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. CP. Thank you for all of our participants. Actually, this brings us to the end of the program. And if you allow me, Sir Dindo, I'll close it with just a short statement from our partner. As you know, we've organized this event with our partner, Philippine Business for Environmental Stewardship, or PBES. And they recently came out with a statement, which I'll just quote, that it's times like this that we need to collectively navigate our economy to a more sustainable path. towards sustainable development of our environment and efficient utilization of its resources. Now is the time to show that environmental stewardship is not an empty phrase. So with that, I would like to officially before I close, thank all of our speakers and all of our participants for the time that they've given us this morning. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Salamat.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
goodbye.
Salamat.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.